Under a blood-red dawn in the Arizona frontier, Elena Cross rides for her life in a torn wedding dress, fleeing a powerful father and a ruthless officer she was forced to marry. Behind her, armed men close in. Ahead, unknown desert, unforgiving and deadly. When she collapses from exhaustion, she wakes to find herself surrounded by warriors of a land she was taught to fear. And a silent, commanding leader who may decide whether she lives or dies. Stay with me until the end of this story, and please hit like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey has traveled. The horse stumbled again, and this time Elena nearly went over its neck. Her hands were raw where the reins had cut into them, blood mixing with dust and sweat. The animal beneath her was failing, foam at its mouth, breathing like a bellows. But she couldn't stop. Not yet. Not while the sound of hoofbeats still echoed somewhere behind her in the canyon. The wedding dress had been white once. Now it was the color of rust and earth, the hem torn away entirely where it had caught on scrub and rock. The bodice hung loose where she'd ripped out the stays just to breathe. Her hair, which her mother had spent 2 hours pinning into an elaborate arrangement, whipped across her face in matted tangles. She had been married 4 hours ago. She had run 3 hours ago. The sun was climbing now, turning the sky from deep purple to copper, and the heat was already building. Elena's lips were cracked, her tongue thick in her mouth. She hadn't thought to bring water, hadn't thought about anything except getting out, getting away, putting distance between herself and the church, and the man who now owned her by law, Captain Marcus Ridgway, her husband. The thought made her stomach turn. The horse's gait was uneven now, one leg favoring, and Elena felt a spike of guilt through her panic. This wasn't the animal's fault. None of this was. But she'd stolen the first mount she'd found, a cavalry horse, ironically, and driven it hard into country she didn't know, following nothing but instinct and desperation. The canyon narrowed ahead, rock walls rising on either side. Elena urged the horse forward, and it obeyed, but slower now, each step labored. The sound of pursuit had faded, but she didn't trust it. Marcus was methodical. He wouldn't give up. And her father would want her back even more than Marcus did. Samuel Cross didn't tolerate defiance, especially not from his daughter, especially not in front of half the territory's elite, gathered to watch him cement an alliance with the military through marriage. The humiliation alone would make him relentless. The canyon opened suddenly into a wider expanse of broken desert, dotted with Joshua trees and sage. The horse slowed to a walk, then stopped entirely, flanks heaving. Elena tried to urge it on, but the animal wouldn't move. Its legs were shaking. "Please," she whispered. "Please, just a little further." But the horse was done. Elena slid from the saddle, nearly collapsing when her feet hit the ground. Her legs had gone numb from riding, and her whole body ached. She clung to the stirrup for a moment, waiting for the dizziness to pass, then forced herself to look back the way she'd come. Nothing, just empty desert and the dark mouth of the canyon. She should keep moving, on foot if necessary. But which direction? The sun was climbing to her right, which meant that was east. She'd been riding roughly north, she thought, away from the settlement, away from the fort. But north led deeper into territory that wasn't claimed by anyone she knew, territory her father's maps labeled as hostile or simply left blank. Elena had never been off her father's land before today, never been anywhere without an escort. The world beyond the ranch and the fort had been described to her in warnings and whispered stories, a place of dangers too numerous to name. Now she was standing in the middle of it, alone, in a ruined wedding dress. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh, but what came out was closer to a sob. She sank down beside a rock, pulling her knees to her chest. The horse stood nearby, head lowered, still breathing hard. Elena knew she should do something for it, find water, tend to it somehow, but she had nothing, no canteen, no supplies, no idea where water might be. She'd run with nothing but rage and fear. The sun climbed higher, the temperature rose, Elena's thoughts started to blur at the edges, exhaustion and thirst muddling together. She knew she needed to move, to find shade at least, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Everything hurt. Her feet were blistered inside the impractical shoes, white silk chosen by her mother, and her skin was already burning under the sun. She thought about the church, the moment when Marcus had lifted her veil and she'd seen the cold satisfaction in his eyes, the moment she'd understood fully what her life was going to be. He hadn't spoken to her except to say his vows. hadn't needed to. Everything had already been arranged between him and her father. Marcus got legitimacy, marriage to a rancher's daughter, connections, land rights eventually. Her father got military protection, contracts, influence at the fort, and Elena got a husband who looked at her the way men looked at horses they were buying, assessing, calculating value. During the reception, while people drank and congratulated her father on the match, Marcus had leaned close and told her exactly what he expected. The tone had been conversational, almost friendly, but the words had been clear. Obedience, deference, children, eventually, when he decided the time was right. She would run his household. She would not embarrass him. She would be, his exact words, an asset, not a liability. And when she'd excused herself to the washroom and instead slipped out the back of the church, hitched up her skirts, and run for the stables, she'd felt something crack open inside her chest, something that felt like the first real breath she'd taken in years. Even now, sitting in the dirt with no water and no plan, that feeling hadn't entirely faded. She'd rather die out here than go back. The thought was clear and certain, and it steadied her a little. If those were the options, death or Marcus, she'd choose this. She'd choose the desert and whatever came with it. Elena forced herself to stand. Her legs shook, but they held. The horse lifted its head, watching her with dark, exhausted eyes. "I'm sorry," she told it. "I'm so sorry." She didn't know if she was apologizing for running it into the ground or for what might happen next. Maybe both. She started walking, heading roughly north still, because it was the only direction that made sense, away from everything behind her, towards something unknown. The dress dragged in the dirt, and after a few minutes she stopped and tore more of it away, ripping the skirt until it ended at her knees. Better. Lighter. The sun beat down. The landscape shimmered with heat. Elena put one foot in front of the other and tried not to think about how thirsty she was, how exposed, how utterly alone. She didn't see them until they were almost on top of her. One moment, the desert was empty. The next, there were shapes rising from behind rocks and brush, moving with a silence that didn't seem human. Elena froze, her heart slamming into her throat. Warriors. 6 of them, maybe 7. It was hard to count because they seemed to materialize from the landscape itself, as if the desert had decided to take form. They were on foot, dressed in earth-toned clothing that blended with the terrain, carrying weapons she recognized from her father's warnings, bows, lances, knives. They surrounded her in seconds, forming a loose circle. None of them spoke. Elena's mind went blank with terror. Every story she'd ever heard came flooding back, stories told by soldiers at the fort, by ranch hands, by her father when he wanted to make a point about why she needed to stay close, stay safe, stay under his control. Stories about what happened to people who wandered into the wrong territory. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out except a small, broken sound. One of the warriors stepped forward. He was older than the others, his face weathered, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then said something in a language she didn't understand. Elena shook her head. I can't. He spoke again, the same phrase, and this time there was a question in it. "I don't understand," Elena managed. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. The warrior frowned. He turned and said something to the others, and they responded in quick, clipped exchanges. Elena caught none of it. Her legs were shaking again, worse now, and black spots were dancing at the edges of her vision. Then the circle parted, and someone else approached. He was taller than the others, younger, perhaps 30, perhaps less. His face was angular, stern, with dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He wore his hair long, tied back, and there was an air of authority about him that made the other warriors defer without question. He stopped a few feet away and studied her with the same unreadable expression as the others. Elena tried to speak again, but the world tilted suddenly, and her knees buckled. She hit the ground hard, pain shooting through her palms where she caught herself. The last thing she heard before the darkness pulled her under was someone speaking, a low voice, calm and commanding, then nothing. She woke to the smell of smoke and something cooking. For a disoriented moment, Elena thought she was back at the ranch, that everything had been a nightmare. The wedding, the flight, the desert. But then she opened her eyes and saw canvas above her, dim light filtering through, and the reality came crashing back. She was lying on something soft, blankets, furs maybe. Her body ached everywhere, a deep, bone-level exhaustion that made even breathing feel like work. Her throat was dry as sand. "You're awake!" Elena's head jerked toward the voice. A woman sat nearby, older, with gray threading through her dark hair. She was doing something with her hands, weaving, maybe, or repairing something, and she didn't look up when she spoke. "Water?" Elena croaked. The woman set aside her work and picked up a clay vessel. She moved to Elena's side and helped her sit up enough to drink. The water was warm, tasted slightly of earth, and it was the best thing Elena had ever experienced. She drank too fast and started coughing. "Slowly," the woman said. Her English was accented but clear. "You'll make yourself sick." Elena forced herself to sip instead of gulp. When the vessel was empty, the woman took it back and returned to her seat. "Where am I?" Elena asked. "Safe. For now." "Who are you?" "My name is Nakai. I tend to the sick and injured." She picked up her weaving again. "You were neither, exactly, but close enough. Exhaustion, dehydration, foolishness." The last word carried a note of judgment that Elena might have bristled at under other circumstances. Right now, she was too tired to argue. "How long have I been here?" 2 days. Elena's eyes widened. 2 days? You needed rest. Your body took it. 2 days. Marcus would have come looking for her by now. Her father would have sent men. They'd be searching. And if they found this place... "They won't find us," Nakai said, as if reading her thoughts. "We move carefully, and we know this land better than your people ever will." "I'm not," Elena started, then stopped. She didn't know how to finish that sentence. "I'm not with them?" But she was, wasn't she? She was Samuel Cross's daughter. She'd lived her whole life in that world, benefited from it, never questioned it until it turned on her. Nakai watched her struggle with it, something knowing in her expression. "You ran from them." It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded anyway. "Why?" Elena looked down at her hands. They were cleaner than they'd been. Someone had washed them, but the cuts from the rains were still visible, angry red lines across her palms. "They were going to make me into something I'm not," she said finally. "Someone who just exists, who does what she's told and doesn't think and doesn't want anything except what she's supposed to want." She looked up at Nakai. "I couldn't do it. I couldn't just disappear like that." Nakai studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly, as if Elena had passed some kind of test. "You're in Kael's camp now. He leads us. He's the one who found you." "The tall one," Elena said, remembering. "Yes." "Is he going to kill me?" Nakai's expression didn't change. "He hasn't decided yet." The casual honesty of it was almost worse than a lie would have been. Elena felt her heart start to race again. "You're an outsider," Nakai continued, still working with her hands. "You come from the people who take our land, kill our families, break their promises. Kael has no reason to trust you, no reason to help you." "Then why am I still alive?" "Because he's curious, and because..." Nakai paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because you ran from them too. That means something. Maybe not enough, but something." Elena pulled the blanket tighter around herself. She was wearing different clothes now, she realized. Simple, practical, a long shirt made of soft leather, leggings. Someone had undressed her, cleaned her, cared for her while she was unconscious. "Who changed my clothes?" "I did." "Thank you." Nakai inclined her head. "Don't thank me yet. You're not safe here. You're not safe anywhere. The question is where you'd rather take your chances." Before Elena could respond, the tent flap opened and the tall warrior, Kael, entered. He had to duck slightly to fit through the opening, and when he straightened, the space felt smaller. His presence was like a physical weight, commanding attention without effort. He spoke to Nakai in their language, a brief exchange, and she responded and then gathered her things and left, leaving Elena alone with him. Kael stood near the entrance for a moment, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then he moved closer and lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the ground, an easy, controlled motion. "You can understand me," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Good. That makes this easier." He tilted his head slightly. "What's your name?" Elena. Elena Cross. Something flickered across his face at the surname, there and gone, too quickly to read. Cross. Samuel Cross's daughter. Elena's stomach tightened. You know him. Everyone knows him. He owns half the territory. Or thinks he does. Kyle's voice was level, but there was an edge underneath. He's the one who pushed the army to expand the fort. The one who brings in more settlers every season. The one who promises them land that isn't his to give. I know what he's done, Elena said quietly. Do you? Kyle leaned forward slightly. Do you know about the families pushed out? The hunting grounds fenced off? The water sources claimed? Elena hesitated. I know he doesn't care who he hurts. Not really. And yet you lived in his house, benefited from what he took. The accusation stung because it was true. I didn't choose that. None of us choose where we're born, Kyle said, but we choose what we do about it. He watched her reaction carefully. You ran. Why? Elena thought about lying, making herself sound more noble than she was. But something about Kyle's direct gaze made her feel like he'd see through anything but the truth. They married me to the cavalry officer, Captain Marcus Ridgway. It was an arrangement, land and influence traded for protection and military contracts. I was just, she struggled to find the words, part of the deal, like livestock. So you ran to save yourself. Yes. Not because you suddenly realized your father's crimes, not because you couldn't live with the blood on your family's hands. You ran because you didn't want to be someone's property. The words were harsh, but Elena couldn't deny them. Yes, she said again. Cale was silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. At least you're honest. What are you going to do with me? I don't know yet. He stood in that same fluid motion, all controlled power. You're a liability. Your father will be looking for you. Your husband, too. They'll send men. Having you here puts my people at risk. Then let me go. Where would you go? Back to them? No. The word came out fierce, certain. Then where? Cale moved toward the tent entrance, then paused and looked back at her. You don't know this land. You have no supplies, no skills for survival here. You'd last maybe another day on your own. I'll figure it out. Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. You have courage. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. He pushed aside the tent flap. Rest. Eat when Nakai brings food. We'll talk more when you're stronger. Wait. But he was already gone. Elena sat in the silence of the tent, her mind spinning. She was alive for now. That was more than she'd expected when she'd collapsed in the desert. But Kyle was right. She had no plan, no skills, no real understanding of where she was or how to survive here. All she had was the certainty that she couldn't go back. She'd have to make that be enough. Over the next few days, Elena slowly regained her strength. Nakai brought her food, unfamiliar but nourishing, mostly stews and flatbread and dried meat. She explained what Elena was eating, taught her a few words in their language. Enough to say thank you, to ask for water, to understand basic commands. The tent Elena occupied was at the edge of the camp, and through the opening she could see people moving about their daily work. Women prepared food, tended fires, worked hides. Men crafted weapons, repaired tools, trained younger warriors. Children ran between the tents, playing games that seemed universal. Chase, hide and seek, wrestling. It looked like life. Ordinary in its way. Not the savage chaos her father's world had described. On the fourth day, Nakai told her she was well enough to move around. But don't wander far, she warned. People are still deciding about you. Some think Kyle should send you away. Others think you're a spy. I'm not. I know, but they don't. Nakai handed her a pair of worn moccasins. These will fit better than those ridiculous shoes you had. Elena took them gratefully. Her silk wedding shoes had been ruined beyond saving. These were practical, comfortable, clearly made by someone who understood how feet worked. She stepped outside for the first time since waking. The sun was bright, the air dry and hot but moving, not stagnant like inside the tent. The camp was larger than she'd realized, maybe 30 tents arranged in a loose circle, with the desert stretching away in all directions. Several people stopped what they were doing to stare at her. Elena felt the weight of their gazes, curious and hostile in equal measure. She kept her eyes down and stayed close to the tent. A child approached. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, with curious eyes and a gap-toothed smile. She said something in their language, rapid and excited. "I don't understand," Elena said gently. The girl frowned, then tried again, slower, pointing at Elena's hair. Elena touched it self-consciously. It was still a mess, barely tamed. "You like it?" The girl nodded enthusiastically, then reached out and touched a strand. Her own hair was dark and straight, worn in 2 neat braids. She seemed fascinated by the difference. Elena's hair was lighter, with a slight wave to it. "Her name is Kai," Nakai said, appearing beside Elena. "She's asking if she can braid it for you." "Oh." Elena looked at the girl's hopeful face. Yes, she can." Kai's face lit up. She grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her toward a shaded area between tents where several women were working. They looked up as Kai chattered at them excitedly, gesturing to Elena. One of the women, younger, maybe close to Elena's age, smiled and said something that made the others laugh. Not unkindly, Elena thought, more like teasing. Kai pushed Elena down to sit and set to work on her hair with serious concentration. Her small fingers were surprisingly deft, working through the tangles with patience Elena wouldn't have expected from a child. The women nearby continued their work. One was scraping a hide, another grinding something in a stone bowl. They talked among themselves, occasionally glancing at Elena, but not addressing her directly. It should have been uncomfortable being on display like this. But something about the ordinary domesticity of it, the gentle efficiency of Kai's hands in her hair, made Elena feel less like a prisoner and more like something else. A guest, maybe. Or a problem they were still figuring out how to solve. When Kai finished, Elena reached up to touch the intricate braids. The girl had woven her hair into a pattern similar to her own, practical and neat. "Thank you," Elena said, and then remembering Nakai's lessons, tried the words in their language. "Ahehe." Kai beamed. A shadow fell across them, and Elena looked up to find Kael standing nearby. He must have been watching for a while. His expression was thoughtful as he took in the scene, Elena sitting among the women, Kai still fussing with the end of one braid. He said something to Kai, who responded with obvious affection, hugging his leg before running off to join the other children. Then he looked at Elena. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Elena stood and followed him away from the tents, out into the desert. They walked in silence for several minutes, until the sounds of the camp had faded and there was nothing but wind and the crunch of their footsteps. "You're recovering well," Kael said finally. "Thanks to Nakai. And you, I suppose, for not killing me." "The day isn't over yet." Elena glanced at him sharply, but his face was unreadable. "I've been thinking about your situation," he continued, "about what to do with you. And you can't stay here indefinitely. It's not safe, for you or for us." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "But sending you back isn't an option either, if what you say is true." "It is true." "Then you need to learn how to survive on your own, out here, in this land." Elena frowned. "I thought you said I'd die in a day." "If you left now, yes. But if you learned," he studied her carefully, "if you understood this place, respected it, listened to it, then maybe you'd have a chance." "You'd teach me?" "I'd have someone teach you. Whether you learn is up to you." Kael started walking again, and Elena hurried to keep up. "You're not soft, I can see that. You ran when you needed to. You survived longer than you should have. That's something. But survival takes more than courage. It takes skill, knowledge, patience. How long would it take to learn enough to—" "Months, maybe longer." He glanced at her. "Do you have months?" Elena thought about Marcus, about her father's men searching. "I don't know." "Then we'll move quickly. But understand this." Kael stopped again, his voice dropping. "If your people find us because of you, if they come here looking, people I care about could die, children, elders, families. I won't let that happen." "I understand." "Do you? Because if I think for a moment that you're a threat, that you're leading them to us intentionally or otherwise, I will end this. Do you understand that?" The directness of it should have terrified her. Instead, Elena felt a strange kind of relief. At least he was honest. At least she knew where she stood. "Yes," she said. "I understand." Kyle held her gaze for a long moment, as if weighing her answer. Then he nodded once. "We start tomorrow, before dawn. Don't make me regret this." He walked back toward camp, leaving Elena standing in the desert alone. She looked out at the vast emptiness surrounding her, the scrub and rock, and endless sky. This land that her people feared and claimed and never really understood. She was going to have to learn it. All of it. Fast enough and well enough to survive whatever came next. The thought was terrifying. The thought was exhilarating. For the first time since fleeing the church, Elena smiled. Dawn came cold and unforgiving, the sky still more black than blue when Nakai shook Elena awake. "Get up. He's waiting." Elena's body protested every movement. She'd thought she was recovering, but apparently sleeping on soft blankets for a few days had made her forget what actual physical demand felt like. She pulled on the clothes Nakai had left, leather leggings, a tunic that tied at the side, the moccasins, and stumbled out into the pre-dawn chill. Kyle was already outside the camp perimeter, standing near a cluster of rocks with his arms crossed. He didn't acknowledge her approach, just started walking the moment she got close enough. Elena hurried to catch up, her breath coming out in small clouds. "Where are we going?" "To see if you can listen." That was all he said for the next half hour as they walked into the desert. The sky gradually lightened, turning the landscape from shadow to form. Elena tried to walk quietly, the way Kyle did, but every step she took seemed to crunch and scrape against the ground. He moved like he was part of the terrain itself, each footfall deliberate and nearly silent. Finally, he stopped at the top of a low ridge and turned to face her. "What do you hear?" Elena listened. Wind. The distant call of some bird she couldn't identify. Nothing else. "Wind," she said. "A bird. What else?" She strained, trying to pick out anything more. Nothing else." Kyle's expression didn't change. "You're not listening. You're waiting for sounds you already know." He gestured to the landscape spreading out below them. "This land talks constantly. You just don't know its language yet." "Then teach me." "Close your eyes." Elena hesitated, then obeyed. "Now listen again. Don't try to name what you hear. Just let it in." She stood there, eyes closed, feeling foolish and frustrated. But slowly, as the seconds stretched, she started to notice things. The wind wasn't constant. It came in gusts, each one carrying a slightly different pitch as it moved through different types of brush. The bird call wasn't alone. There were others, farther away, responding in a pattern. And underneath it all, a kind of silence that wasn't really silence at all, more like the sound of space itself. "The wind changes," she said slowly. "It's not the same. And there's more than one bird. They're talking to each other, maybe." When she opened her eyes, Kyle was watching her with something that might have been approval. Might have been. "Better," he said. "The land tells you everything you need to know if you pay attention. Where water is, where danger is, what's coming before it arrives." He started walking again, angling down the slope. "Your people treat this place like an enemy to conquer. That's why so many of you die here. And how should we treat it? Like what it is. Indifferent. The desert doesn't care if you live or die. It just is. You learn to exist within that, or you don't exist at all." They walked for another hour, Kyle occasionally stopping to point out things Elena would never have noticed on her own. A barely visible trail where animals had passed, plants that held water in their roots, tracks in the dust that told stories she couldn't yet read. "Here," Kyle said, crouching beside a patch of scrubby growth. "What do you see?" Elena knelt beside him. The plants looked half dead, withered and gray. "Nothing useful." He reached out and broke off a piece of the stem. Clear liquid beaded at the break. "Water. Not much, but enough in an emergency." He handed it to her. "Taste it." She touched her tongue to the moisture. It was bitter, unpleasant, but definitely water. "Don't rely on it," Kyle continued, "but know it's there. Know what everything offers, what everything costs." He stood and kept moving, speaking over his shoulder. "Your people bring water with them and think that makes them strong. It makes them dependent. They need their canteens, their supply lines, their forts. Take those away, and they die. And you don't need any of that. We need water. We need food. We need shelter. But we know where to find those things in the land itself. That's the difference. He glanced back at her. You're going to learn that difference, starting now. The lesson continued as the sun climbed higher. Kael showed her how to read the landscape for water sources, where certain plants grew, how the rock formations held moisture, the way animal tracks converged. He taught her to move more quietly, placing her feet on rocks and hard ground instead of loose dirt. He made her practice until her legs ached and her concentration frayed, then made her practice more. Again, he said, when she stumbled for the third time trying to cross a stretch of loose scree silently. I'm trying. Try better. The harshness should have made her angry, but she was too tired for anger. She went back and tried again, focusing on each step, testing her weight before committing. This time she made it across with only minimal noise. Kael nodded once. Better. Still terrible, but better. By the time they headed back to camp, Elena's body was screaming and her head was crammed with more information than she could possibly retain. Plants and tracks and sounds and signs, all jumbled together in an exhausting blur. Tomorrow, Kael said as they approached the tents, we work on fire. I know how to make fire. He looked at her, one eyebrow raised. Do you? Elena thought about the fires at her father's ranch, at the fort, fires built in stone hearths and iron stoves, fed with chopped wood that someone else had gathered and dried. Fires that started with matches or embers from other fires. Maybe not the way you mean, she admitted. Then tomorrow you learn. He walked away toward the center of camp, leaving her standing there swaying slightly with exhaustion. Nakai appeared at her elbow. Come, you need to eat and rest. I'm fine. You're barely standing. Don't be stupid. Nakai steered her toward the tent with a firm grip. Kael pushes hard, always has. If you're going to survive his teaching, you need to take care of yourself when he's not watching. Elena let herself be guided, too tired to protest. Inside the tent, Nakai had prepared food, more of the stew, some kind of dried fruit Elena didn't recognize, water in the clay vessel. Why is he doing this? Elena asked between bites. Teaching me, I mean. He made it clear I'm a problem. Why not just get rid of the problem? Nakai settled across from her with her own food. Because despite what he tells himself, Kael doesn't like being cruel. He's hard, yes, demanding, but not cruel. She chewed thoughtfully. And I think he sees something in you, something that reminds him of himself, maybe? What do you mean? Kael wasn't born into leadership. He earned it, proved himself when others doubted. Nakai's eyes grew distant. His father was weak, made bad agreements with your people that cost us land and dignity. Kael watched that happen as a boy, watched his father become smaller and smaller, trying to appease men who would never be satisfied. When his father died, Kael could have followed that path. Instead, he chose to fight. Elena absorbed this, seeing Kael in a new light. How old was he? 16. Nakai's voice was quiet. 16 years old, and he stood in front of the council and told them the old ways weren't working, that we needed to be stronger, smarter, harder to push around. Half the elders wanted to cast him out for disrespect. The other half saw the truth in what he said. And now he leads. Now he leads. Because he was right. Because he's kept us alive when others would have been destroyed or scattered. Nakai looked at Elena directly. So when he spends time teaching you instead of casting you out, it means something. Don't waste it. Elena finished her food in silence, turning Nakai's words over in her mind. She'd been so focused on her own situation, her escape, her survival, that she hadn't thought much about what it meant for Kael to help her, what it cost him in time and attention and risk. That night she lay awake longer than usual, listening to the sounds of the camp settling into sleep. Somewhere a child cried briefly and was soothed. Someone laughed at something, the sound carrying through the still air. Normal sounds. Human sounds. She thought about the church, about Marcus standing at the altar with that cold, assessing look. Thought about her father's house and the life she would have led there. Comfortable and suffocating, every day the same as the last. Nothing expected of her except compliance. Then she thought about today. The desert stretching endless and indifferent, Kael's relentless instruction, the way her body hurt from actually being used instead of just existing. She'd take this. Whatever came with it, she'd take this. The next morning started the same way. Nakai shaking her awake before dawn, Kael waiting outside camp with that impatient stillness. But this time when they walked into the desert, Elena paid attention differently. She tried to hear what the land was saying, noticed the details Kael had pointed out before. He caught her at it once, studying a set of tracks in the dust, and something almost like approval crossed his face. "What are they?" he asked. "Some kind of cat, maybe? The pads are different from dogs." "Mountain lion, passed through last night, heading east." He crouched beside the tracks. "See how deep the rear prints are? It was carrying something, a kill, probably." Elena filed that information away with everything else, her mind becoming a catalog of details she was desperate not to forget. The fire lesson was harder than she expected. Kael made her gather her own materials, dry grass for tinder, small twigs, larger branches. Then he showed her the bow drill method, spinning a stick against a wooden base until friction created an ember. It looked simple when he did it. When Elena tried, nothing happened except her arms got tired and the stick kept slipping out of position. "Your stance is wrong," Kael said. "You're fighting the motion instead of working with it." "I don't understand what that means." He moved behind her, adjusting her posture with an impersonal efficiency that somehow felt more intimate than if he'd been gentle about it. "Like this. Let your body's weight do the work. Stop trying to force it." Elena tried again, focusing on what he'd shown her. The motion felt slightly more natural, but still no ember. Again. She went at it until her shoulders burned and sweat ran down her back despite the morning chill. Just when she was ready to give up, a thin stream of smoke rose from the base. Her heart jumped. "Don't stop," Kael said. "Keep going, steady." Elena maintained the rhythm and the smoke thickened. Then, finally, a tiny red glow appeared in the accumulated dust. "Now transfer it, carefully." She'd watched him do this part, lifting the ember on a piece of bark and depositing it into the prepared tinder bundle. Her hand shook as she tried to replicate the movement. The ember fell into the grass, and she bent low, blowing gently the way he'd shown her. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the grass began to smoke, then glow, then suddenly burst into flame. "I did it," Elena breathed. "You made fire once, in perfect conditions with me standing over you," Kael said. "Don't celebrate yet. Do it again." She did it 7 more times that morning, until the motion became muscle memory and she could produce fire in under 10 minutes. By the end, her arms felt like lead and her lungs hurt from all the careful blowing, but she could do it. Kael watched her final attempt with an expression that was as close to satisfaction as she'd seen on him. "Good enough," he said. "For now." They walked back to camp in silence, but it felt different than before. Less like he was tolerating her presence and more like she'd earned a tiny measure of respect. Over the following weeks, the pattern continued. Every morning before dawn, Elena met Kael outside the camp. He taught her to track animals, to identify edible plants, to find north using the sun and stars. He showed her how to move through the desert without leaving obvious signs, how to read weather in the clouds and wind, how to sense danger before it arrived. The lessons were relentless, and Kael was rarely satisfied. But slowly, incrementally, Elena improved. Her movements became quieter, her observations sharper, her understanding of the desert's language deeper. She learned other things too, not from formal lessons, but from living among the people. Nakai taught her to prepare food their way, to tan hides, to sew with sinew and bone needles. The women gradually accepted her presence, teaching her words and phrases, correcting her pronunciation with varying degrees of patience. Kai became a constant companion whenever Elena was in camp, chattering away in a mix of languages Elena was starting to understand. The child had decided they were friends, and Elena found herself looking forward to those moments. The simple, uncomplicated affection that expected nothing except attention. One evening, about a month after she'd arrived, Elena sat outside her tent working on a piece of leather Nakai had given her to practice stitching. Kai was beside her, making a game of threading gut through pre-punched holes. "You're getting better," Nakai observed, checking Elena's work. "The stitches are more even. My fingers are still clumsy." "They'll learn," Nakai settled beside them, picking up her own project. Kael says you're progressing faster than he expected. Elena looked up, surprised. He said that? Not to you, obviously. He's not going to make your head big with compliments. Nakai's tone was dry. But yes, he's impressed, though he'd bite his tongue off before admitting it directly. Warmth bloomed in Elena's chest, unexpected and unsettling. She'd been working so hard for her own survival, but somewhere along the way, Kael's approval had started to matter. Not just as a measure of her progress, but as something she wanted for its own sake. That realization should have worried her. Instead, it felt like something clicking into place. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said, keeping her eyes on her stitching. "You can ask. Does he ever... is there someone..." She fumbled for the right words. "Is Kael spoken for? Married or promised or whatever you call it?" Nakai was quiet for a long moment. When Elena glanced up, the older woman was watching her with knowing eyes. "He was," Nakai said finally. "Her name was Amma. She died 4 years ago when soldiers attacked a hunting camp. She was pregnant." Elena's hands stilled. "Oh." Kael led the retaliation. It was brutal. Necessary, maybe, but brutal. Nakai's voice was carefully neutral. Since then, he's been alone, by choice. He says his responsibility is to the people, not to personal happiness. That sounds lonely. It is, but Kael's good at enduring things that would break other people. Nakai went back to her work. "Why do you ask?" "No reason, just curious." The sound was deeply skeptical, but Nakai didn't push. That night, Elena lay awake thinking about Kael, not as the stern teacher or the leader who'd spared her life, but as a man who'd lost everything and chosen to carry on anyway. She thought about the way he moved through the world, that absolute self-possession that came from having survived the worst and decided to keep living despite it. She understood that now, in a way she couldn't have a month ago. Before she'd run, before the desert, before all of this, Elena had never really had to endure anything. Discomfort, yes. Frustration and boredom and the slow suffocation of a constrained life. But not loss, not grief, not the kind of pain that carved out pieces of you and forced you to figure out how to keep going with what remained. She was beginning to understand what that took, what it cost. The next morning's lesson took them further from camp than they'd gone before. Kael led her up into rocky terrain, moving steadily through narrow passages between stone walls that radiated yesterday's heat. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her breathing already labored from the climb. "You'll see." They emerged onto a plateau that overlooked a vast expanse of desert, the land rolling away in every direction like a frozen ocean. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting everything in shades of copper and gold. Kael stopped at the edge and stood there, silent. Elena came up beside him, struck speechless by the view. She'd seen landscapes before. Her father's ranch had its own stark beauty, but this was different. This was wild in a way that made her chest tight, something vast and old and utterly indifferent to human concerns. "This is what you're learning to survive in," Kael said quietly. "Not the camp, not the lessons. This." He gestured to the endless desert. "All of it. When you leave here, and you will leave eventually, this is what you'll face. I need to know you understand what that means." Elena didn't look away from the view. "I understand." "Do you? Because surviving isn't the same as living. You can know every skill I teach you and still die out there if you don't respect what you're dealing with. Then teach me to respect it." Kael turned to look at her, and for the first time she met his eyes without flinching or looking away. Something passed between them in that moment, some recognition that shifted the ground beneath everything else. "Sit," he said finally. They sat side by side on the rock, watching the sun climb and the shadows retreat. Kael didn't speak for a long time, and Elena learned to be comfortable with the silence. "When I was young," he said eventually, "I thought strength meant never bending, never compromising, just standing firm against everything." He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers. "My father bent. He compromised and negotiated and gave ground, and I hated him for it. Thought he was weak. What changed your mind?" He died trying to protect people who'd already been promised safety by the very agreements he'd made. He believed in those promises. Believed your people would honor their word. Kyle's jaw tightened. They didn't. Elena wanted to apologize, to defend her people, but both responses felt wrong, so she just listened. After that, I swore I'd never make his mistakes. I'd be hard where he was soft, uncompromising where he bent. Kale threw the stone, watching it arc out into the empty air and disappear. But you can be so hard you break too. That's what I'm learning, slowly. Is that why you didn't kill me? Because you're learning to bend? Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of all the dying. He looked at her again, and the exhaustion in his eyes was startling. Your people and mine have been killing each other for so long, I'm not sure anyone remembers how it started. Just that it's what we do. Kill and retaliate and kill again. It doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't it? His voice was bitter. Your father won't stop taking land. The army won't stop expanding. My people won't stop defending what's ours. Where's the room for anything else? Elena didn't have an answer. She'd been so focused on her own escape, her own survival, that she hadn't thought much about the larger pattern they were all trapped in. But Kyle was right. It was a cycle, vicious and self-perpetuating. Maybe it starts with small things, she said finally, one person at a time, one choice at a time. Is that what you think you're doing? Making a choice that matters? I'm trying to. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a real smile, small and fleeting, but genuine. You're stubborn. I'll give you that. You're not exactly flexible yourself. No, he admitted, I'm not. They sat there as the sun climbed higher, the heat building around them. Eventually, Kyle stood and offered her his hand. Elena took it, letting him pull her to her feet. His grip was calloused and strong, and he held on for just a second longer than necessary before letting go. Come on, he said. I want to show you something else. He led her along the ridge to a spot where water had collected in a natural basin in the rock. It was clear and still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. This is one of the sacred places, Kyle said, where the land gives without being asked. My people have been coming here for generations. He knelt beside the water. I'm showing you because I trust you not to betray it. The weight of that trust settled over Elena like a physical thing. I won't. I swear it. I know. He stood and started back toward camp. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought you here. That evening, as Elena worked outside her tent, she noticed a change in the camp's atmosphere. People were gathering near the central fire, talking in low, urgent voices. Nakai emerged from one of the larger tents, looking grim. What's happening? Elena asked. Scouts spotted riders. 2 days away, maybe less. Nakai's voice was tight. Cavalry looks like. 20 men or more. Elena's blood went cold. Are they looking for me? We don't know, but the timing is suspicious. Nakai fixed her with a hard look. If they are, if you've led them here somehow, I didn't. I swear I didn't. Kale appeared, moving through the gathering crowd with purpose. When his eyes found Elena, they were cold again, all the warmth from this morning erased. Come with me, he said. It wasn't a request. Elena followed him away from the others, her heart hammering. When they were out of earshot, he turned on her. Did you know about this? No. How could I? Did you leave any kind of trail? Anything that could have led them here? I don't know. I don't think so. Kyle, I've been with you every morning. You've seen where I go, what I do. That doesn't mean you're not working with them somehow. His voice was harsh, all the softness from earlier completely gone. For all I know, this was the plan all along. Gain our trust, learn our location, bring the cavalry down on us. The accusation stung worse than it should have. You don't believe that? I don't know what I believe, but I know what happens if those soldiers find this camp. I know who dies. He stepped closer, and Elena forced herself not to back away. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you the reason they're coming? No. Elena met his eyes, willing him to see the truth. I ran from them. I would never lead them here. Never. They stood frozen for a long moment, the air between them crackling with tension. Finally, Kyle stepped back. Then we move camp tonight. Everyone. We'll be gone before the cavalry gets here. Let me help. You've helped enough. The words were cutting. Stay in your tent. Stay out of the way. He walked away before Elena could respond, leaving her standing alone as the camp erupted into controlled chaos around her. Elena stood frozen, watching the camp transform around her. Tents came down with practiced efficiency, belongings packed into bundles that could be carried or strapped to horses. Children were gathered and quieted, the older ones helping with the work while the younger clung to their mothers. No one looked at Elena. No one spoke to her. She'd become invisible again, but this time it felt different than being ignored in her father's house. This felt like exile. Nakai appeared at her elbow, moving fast. Don't just stand there. If you're not helping, you're in the way. Kael said to stay in my tent. Kael's not thinking clearly right now. He's scared, and when he's scared, he gets mean. Nakai thrust a bundle into Elena's arms. Carry this. Follow me. Keep your mouth shut. Elena obeyed, trailing after Nakai as the older woman moved through the organized chaos with purpose. They packed medical supplies, food stores, everything that couldn't be left behind. The work was mindless and physical, and Elena threw herself into it, grateful for something to do besides stand around feeling like a traitor. Are they really coming because of me? She asked quietly as they worked. Maybe, maybe not. Nakai didn't slow down. Could be they're just patrolling. Could be looking for you specifically. Could be looking for us because someone else talked. Doesn't matter now. What matters is we're gone before they arrive. Where will you go? North. There's another camp, relatives. We'll stay there until it's safe to come back. Nakai paused, looking at Elena directly. If it's ever safe to come back. The implication hung heavy between them. This place, these people's home, might be lost because of her. Because she'd run here. Because Kael had been foolish enough to help her. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. Sorry doesn't move camps. Work faster. They worked through the night, the camp disappearing piece by piece until there was almost nothing left to show anyone had ever lived here. The fires were scattered and buried. The ground was swept. Everything that could be erased was. Elena watched it happen with a growing sense of loss. She'd only been here a few weeks, but this place had started to feel like something. Not home, exactly, but the possibility of home. The first place since leaving her father's ranch where she'd felt like she might belong. Now it was vanishing, and it was her fault. Kael moved through the work like a storm, barking orders, checking preparations, his face set in hard lines. He didn't come near Elena, didn't acknowledge her existence. The distance hurt more than his earlier anger had. By the time false dawn grayed the eastern sky, they were ready to move. The entire camp, 30-some people, their possessions, their animals, formed into a traveling column. Kael took the lead with the warriors, while the elders and children stayed protected in the center. Elena found herself near the back, walking alongside Nakai. No one had told her she could come. No one had told her she couldn't. She simply fell into step and hoped that was enough. They moved fast, faster than Elena would have thought possible with children and elderly in the group. The pace was punishing, and within the first hour her legs were burning. But she didn't complain, didn't slow down, just kept putting one foot in front of the other. Kai appeared beside her around mid-morning, slipping her small hand into Elena's without a word. The gesture was so simple, so trusting, that Elena felt her throat close up. At least one person here didn't blame her. Tired? Elena asked in halting words she'd learned. Kai shook her head, though her face was drawn with exhaustion. Strong, she said in English, one of the few words she knew. Like you. Elena squeezed her hand gently. Like you too. They walked in silence after that, Kai's presence a small comfort in the midst of everything else. The sun climbed higher, the heat building. Kyle called only brief stops for water and rest, never more than a few minutes. Elena's feet blistered in the moccasins, her back ached from the pack Nakai had given her to carry, but she didn't complain. Complaining would only prove that she didn't belong here, that she was the soft outsider everyone thought she was. By late afternoon, the landscape had changed. They'd climbed into rockier terrain, the desert floor giving way to broken stone and scattered pine. The air was slightly cooler here, and there was actual shade from the trees. Kael finally called a halt in a sheltered canyon where water trickled from a crack in the rock face. People collapsed where they stood. the exhaustion showing now that they'd been given permission to stop. Elena found a spot away from the main group and lowered herself to the ground, every muscle screaming. Kai curled up beside her and was asleep within seconds, her head on Elena's lap. Nakai appeared with water and dried meat. Eat. We move again in an hour. An hour? Elena's voice came out hoarse. People need more rest than that. People need to not be caught by cavalry soldiers. 1 hour. Nakai moved on to distribute food to others, leaving Elena alone with her exhaustion and guilt. She ate mechanically, forcing the food down even though she wasn't hungry. Kai slept through it, her small face peaceful despite the circumstances. Elena smoothed the child's hair back gently, careful not to wake her. A shadow fell across them. Elena looked up to find Kyle standing there, his face still set in those hard lines. We need to talk, he said. Elena carefully extracted herself from under Kai, laying the child's head on a rolled blanket. Then she followed Kyle away from the others, into a cluster of rocks that gave them privacy. He turned on her the moment they were out of earshot. This can't continue. I know. Do you? Because you're still here, still following along like you have any right to be part of this. The words stung, but Elena forced herself to stay calm. Where else would I go? Back to your people. Back to the cavalry. Tell them whatever story you want. That we kidnapped you, held you hostage. They'll believe it. Then you're safe and we're no longer your problem. Is that what you think I want? To go back? I don't know what you want anymore. Kale's voice was rough, tired. I thought I did. Thought you were someone trying to escape a bad situation. But maybe you were just playing a role. Maybe this whole thing was... Stop! Elena stepped closer, anger finally breaking through. Stop acting like I'm the enemy. I ran from them. I chose to be here. And yes, maybe that was selfish. Maybe it put you in danger, but I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because going back would have killed me. Maybe not right away, but slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. And what about the people here? Kale shot back. The children who had to pack up their homes in the middle of the night? The elders who can barely make this journey? What about them? I know. I know what this costs, and I'm sorry, but I can't undo it. I can only... Elena's voice broke slightly. I can only try to make it worth something. Try to prove that I'm not what you think I am right now. And how are you going to do that? I don't know. But sending me back won't fix anything. The cavalry's already looking. Whether I'm with you or not, they know this area now. They'll keep searching. Kale's jaw worked, muscles tensing. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. I'm asking my people to risk everything. For you, an outsider who's been here all of 5 weeks. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying his frustration. They're doing it because I asked, because they trust me. But if you turn out to be a mistake, if this goes wrong, I lose that trust. And without it, I can't lead, can't protect them. Elena understood then. This wasn't just about her. It was about everything Kyle had built, everything he was responsible for. One wrong choice, and it all came down. So what do you want me to do? She asked quietly. I want you to prove me right for not killing you when I had the chance. The rawness in his voice caught her off guard. I want you to be worth this risk. I'm trying. Try harder. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Elena standing among the rocks with her heart pounding and her mind racing. She'd known the stakes were high, but hearing Kyle lay them out so starkly made everything more real. She had to prove herself, not just to survive, but because these people deserved better than to suffer because of her. The hour passed too quickly. They moved out again, climbing higher into the mountains as the sun began its descent. The temperature dropped as they gained elevation, and Elena was grateful for it even as her legs protested every step. They traveled until full dark, navigating by moonlight through terrain that made Elena nervous. One wrong step and someone could fall, break something, become a liability the group couldn't afford. But everyone moved with confidence born from deep familiarity, even in the darkness. When Kyle finally called a halt, they'd reached a sheltered plateau ringed by pine trees. There was water here too, a small spring that fed into a pool before disappearing into the rock. We camp here tonight, Kyle announced. Properly. Fires are allowed, but keep them small. Guards in rotation. I want eyes on our back trail all night. People moved to set up, but there was none of the casual conversation from before. Everyone was too tired, too tense. Elena helped where she could, pitching the tent she'd been sharing with Nakai, gathering firewood from the fallen branches nearby. Kai found her again as darkness settled completely, tugging on her sleeve. "Come." Mama made food. Elena followed the child to a small fire where several women were cooking. They looked up as she approached, and the welcome wasn't exactly warm, but it wasn't hostile either. One of them, Kai's mother, Elena thought, gestured for her to sit. "Thank you," Elena said in their language, the words still clumsy on her tongue. Kai's mother nodded and handed her a bowl of something that smelled better than anything had in days. Elena ate slowly, aware of the women's eyes on her, measuring, judging. "You keep up today," one of them said finally in halting English. "Thought you fall behind." "I thought so too," Elena admitted. This got a few quiet laughs, the tension easing slightly. "Why you run from your people?" another woman asked. "You have good life there. Big house, plenty food." Elena considered her answer carefully. "I had those things, but I couldn't breathe. Couldn't choose anything for myself. They were going to make me marry a man who looked at me like property." The women exchanged glances, something unspoken passing between them. "We know this," Kai's mother said quietly. "Your people do this to our women too. Take them, marry them to soldiers. Say it's honor. It's not honor." Elena hadn't known that, hadn't thought about it. The realization made her stomach turn. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what my people have done. For all of it." "You didn't do it," one of the older women said. "But you benefit from it. That's different than doing, but it's not nothing." "I know." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Then Kai's mother spoke again. "Kael is hard on you. He has reason to be. Maybe. But also, he sees his wife in you sometimes. The way she fought against things. The way she didn't bend." The woman's eyes were sad. "It makes him angry and sad both. Confusing." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Later, lying in the tent next to a sleeping Nakai, Elena stared at the canvas above and thought about Kael's dead wife. About the life she must have lived, the fight she must have had in her to earn that comparison. About the child that had died with her, the future that had been erased. No wonder Kael kept everyone at arm's length. No wonder he was so hard, so controlled. He'd already lost everything once. He wasn't about to risk it again. Elena understood that kind of fear now. She'd felt it the moment she'd realized the cavalry was coming, that her presence might destroy these people's lives. The terror of being responsible for someone else's suffering. She fell asleep still thinking about it, her dreams troubled and fragmentary. The next morning brought fog, thick and cold. It clung to everything, reducing visibility to a few dozen feet. Kael ordered the camp to stay put until it cleared, unwilling to risk the treacherous terrain in these conditions. Elena found him standing at the edge of the plateau, staring out into the white nothing. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. "If you must." "I've been thinking about what you said, about proving I'm worth the risk." She moved to stand beside him, careful to leave space between them. "Tell me how. Tell me what I need to do and I'll do it." "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple. Give me a task, a test, something concrete. I can't fix this by just existing and hoping you'll forgive me eventually." Kael was quiet for a long moment, the fog swirling around them. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "There's a settlement 2 days south of here. Fort territory, but mostly civilians. Ranchers, shop owners, people who've made agreements with the army for protection." He paused. "One of them has information we need. About cavalry movements, supply routes, where they're planning to expand next. You want me to get this information? You could walk into that settlement and no one would question you. You're one of them. Samuel Cross's daughter. They'd welcome you, trust you." His eyes found hers through the fog. "And you could find out what we need to know. You want me to spy. I want you to prove you're not still one of them, that you've actually chosen this." The challenge in his voice was clear. "Can you do that?" Elena's mind raced. Going back to that world, even briefly, felt dangerous in ways she couldn't quite articulate. But Kael was offering her a chance to prove herself, to earn back the trust she'd damaged. Who's the contact? She asked. A man named Joseph Brennan. Runs a general store. He's sympathetic to us, passes information when he can, but he won't talk to any of my people. Too risky. You, though, you could buy supplies, make conversation, get him talking. And if I'm recognized, if someone knows I ran from my wedding, then you lie. Say you were confused, scared, that you've come to your senses. Say whatever you need to say to get the information and get out. Elena thought about Marcus, about her father. If word got back to them that she'd been seen, they'd come looking. They'd drag her back. But if she didn't do this, Kael would never trust her. The people here would always see her as the outsider who brought danger to their door. I'll do it, she said. Kael studied her face, searching for something. You understand what you're risking? Yes. And you're still willing? Yes. He nodded slowly. We'll leave tomorrow, assuming the fog clears, just you and me. It'll take 2 days to reach the settlement. You'll go in alone, get the information, and come back. Then we return to the group. What if something goes wrong? Then I leave you there, and you figure out your own way back to the people who claim to own you. His voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. I won't risk myself or the others to rescue you if you make a mistake. Fair enough. Get some rest. It'll be the last comfortable sleep you get for a while. Elena started to walk away, then stopped. Kael? What? Thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet. You might not survive it. The fog cleared by midday, revealing a landscape of stunning beauty. Mountains stretched in every direction, pine forests giving way to rocky peaks. Under other circumstances, Elena might have appreciated it. Now she just felt the weight of what she'd agreed to do pressing down on her shoulders. Nakai found her sitting alone, staring at the view. Kael told me his plan, the older woman said, settling beside her. It's dangerous. I know. If Marcus is in that settlement, if anyone recognizes you, I know, Elena repeated, but I have to do it. I have to prove I'm not the problem everyone thinks I am. Nakai was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? What? I think you're trying to prove something to yourself more than to anyone else. You're trying to figure out who you are now that you're not Samuel Cross's daughter anymore. The observation hit closer to truth than Elena was comfortable with. Maybe. That's not a bad thing, but be careful you don't get yourself killed trying to answer questions that don't have simple answers. Nakai stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. Identity isn't found in one grand gesture. It's built in small choices, day after day. That sounds like something that takes years. It does, but you have to start somewhere. Nakai rested a hand briefly on Elena's shoulder. Try not to die proving yourself. That would be a waste. The next morning, Elena and Kael left before dawn. They traveled light, just weapons, water, and some dried food. The pace was hard but not impossible, and Elena found herself keeping up easier than she would have a month ago. All those dawn lessons had changed her, strengthened her in ways she was still discovering. They didn't talk much. Kael was focused on the trail, constantly watching, listening. Elena tried to do the same, using the skills he'd taught her to stay aware of their surroundings. By late afternoon, they descended out of the mountains and into rolling foothill country. The landscape here showed signs of settlement, fences, cleared land, the occasional distant building. They were close. Kael led them to a sheltered spot in a grove of cottonwoods and called a halt. We'll stay here tonight, he said. Tomorrow morning you go in. I'll wait here until sundown. If you're not back by then, I leave. Understood. They made a cold camp, no fire to give away their position. Elena ate dried meat and tried not to think too hard about tomorrow. Kael sat nearby, checking his weapons with methodical care. Can I ask you something? Elena said finally, unable to stand the silence. If you must. Why are you coming yourself? You could have sent someone else with me. Because if this goes wrong, I want to know about it directly, not hear about it secondhand while I'm 2 days away. He looked up from the knife he was sharpening. And because if you betray us, I want to be the one who deals with it. You still think I might? I think people are complicated. I think you might want to do the right thing and still fail when it comes down to it. He went back to his knife. I've seen it before. Someone convinced they're brave right up until the moment they have to prove it. Then they fold. Is that what your father did? The question hung in the air between them. dangerous. Kale's hand stilled on the blade. Nakai talks too much, he said quietly. She was trying to help me understand you. There's nothing to understand. My father made choices I disagreed with. He died because of them. I learned from his mistakes. Kale's voice was flat, controlled. That's the whole story. I don't think it is. What you think doesn't matter. He sheathed the knife with more force than necessary. Go to sleep. You need rest. Elena wanted to push, to crack through that wall he kept so carefully maintained. But she was already asking enough of him by making this trip. Pushing for personal revelation seemed like too much. She lay down on the hard ground, using her pack as a pillow, and stared up at the stars visible through the cottonwood branches. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably still searching for her. Her father, too. They wouldn't give up. Men like that never did. Tomorrow she was going to walk back into their world and pretend she belonged there. Pretend she was still the obedient daughter, the compliant wife. The thought made her sick. But if it meant proving to Kael that she'd truly chosen this new life, she'd do it. She had to. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of the church, and Marcus's cold eyes, and her father's disappointed face. When Kael shook her awake, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Time to go, he said. Elena sat up, her heart already racing. Right. Okay. Remember, get in, talk to Brennan, get the information, get out. Don't linger, don't draw attention, don't make mistakes. Anything else? Yes. Kael crouched down to her level, his dark eyes intense. If Marcus is there, if anyone recognizes you and it goes bad, run. Don't try to talk your way out. Don't try to explain, just run. Head northeast and I'll find you. You said you'd leave if I wasn't back by sundown. I lied. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. I'll wait, but only if you run the right direction so I can actually find you. The admission surprised her. Why would you wait if you think I might betray you? Because I'm a fool who makes the same mistakes my father did. He stood abruptly. Now go before I change my mind about this whole thing. Elena gathered her courage and stood. Kyle had found her clothes from that first day, the remains of the wedding dress, cleaned and mended as much as possible. It was still torn and stained, but it was clearly expensive fabric, clearly from her old life. She changed behind a tree, the silk feeling strange against her skin after weeks in leather and rough cotton. When she emerged, Kale was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. What? She asked. Nothing. You look like one of them again. That's the point, isn't it? Yes. He turned away. The settlement is 2 miles due south. Follow the road. Brennan's store is on the main street. You can't miss it. Ask about buying supplies. Get him talking. He'll know what to tell you if he trusts you. And if he doesn't? Then you buy your supplies and leave before anyone asks too many questions. Elena nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. I can do this. Prove it. She started walking, following the faint trail that led toward the settlement. After a few steps, she looked back. Kyle was still standing there, watching her go, his face unreadable in the early morning light. Elena turned forward again and kept walking. The settlement appeared gradually, first a few scattered buildings, then more clustered together along a wide dirt road. It was smaller than her father's ranch complex, but bigger than she'd expected. Maybe 50 buildings in all, mostly wood construction, a few made of adobe. People were already moving about, starting their day. A woman swept a porch. 2 men loaded a wagon. Children chased chickens in a yard. Normal life. The kind of life Elena had fled. She took a breath and stepped onto the main street, trying to look like she belonged here. A few people glanced at her curiously, but no one stopped her. Her dress, despite its condition, marked her as someone of status. These people would assume she had reason to be here. The general store was exactly where Kyle said it would be, a large building with a painted sign reading Brennan's Goods. Elena pushed through the door, a small bell chiming to announce her arrival. The interior was dim, cramped with shelves and barrels and hanging goods. The smell of coffee and tobacco and leather filled the air. A man stood behind the counter, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and kind eyes. "Help you, miss?" he asked. "Mr. Brennan?" Elena kept her voice steady. "That's me? I was told you might be able to help me. I need supplies for traveling." Brennan's eyes sharpened slightly, taking in her appearance with more attention. Traveling where? North, into the mountains. Rough country up there, not safe for a lady alone. I'm not alone. Understanding flickered across Brennan's face. I see. Well then, let's see what we can put together for you. He moved around the store, gathering items and setting them on the counter. Coffee, dried meat, ammunition, normal supplies. But as he worked, he spoke quietly. Cavalry's been active lately. Captain Ridgway's been pushing hard, expanding patrols. Says he's looking for someone. Elena's stomach clenched. Looking for who? His wife, apparently, disappeared right after their wedding. Some say she ran off, others say she was taken. Brennan met her eyes meaningfully. Ridgway's convinced it was the latter. He's been questioning anyone who might have information. Is he here, in this settlement? Was. Left 2 days ago with a patrol heading northwest. Brennan paused. They're searching a wide area. Anyone found harboring fugitives or hostile Indians will be arrested. Maybe worse. What about your cavalry movements? Supply routes? Brennan glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice further. There's a new fort being planned, 20 miles northeast of here, near the pass through the mountains. They're bringing in surveyors next month, construction to follow. It'll cut off the northern routes completely. Elena absorbed this, understanding the implications. A fort there would trap Kael's people, limit their movement, make survival even harder. Anything else? She asked. Ridgway's obsessed. He's not going to stop looking until he finds what he's after. Brennan's eyes were sympathetic. If you know anything about his missing wife, miss, I'd suggest you forget it. Men like him don't forgive. They don't forget. I'll keep that in mind. Brennan wrapped the supplies in brown paper and tied them with twine. That'll be $2. Elena froze. She had no money. Hadn't thought about it. I can't pay right now, but I could. The door chimed behind her. Elena turned, and her blood went cold. Marcus Ridgway stood in the doorway, his uniform dusty from travel, his eyes scanning the store's interior. For one frozen moment, those eyes passed over her without recognition. Then they snapped back, focusing with terrible intensity. Elena, he said quietly. She ran. Elena burst through the back door of Brennan's store, her heart slamming against her ribs. Behind her, she heard Marcus shout something, heard boots on the wooden floor. She didn't look back. The alley behind the store was narrow, cluttered with crates and barrels. Elena vaulted over an obstacle without thinking, her body moving on instinct honed by weeks of Kael's training. She hit the ground running and turned northeast, exactly as Kael had told her. Northeast. He'd find her if she ran northeast. Shouts erupted behind her. More than just Marcus now, other soldiers. Probably the patrol Brennan had mentioned. They'd been close, maybe watching the store, maybe just unlucky timing. It didn't matter. What mattered was getting away. Elena's dress caught on something and she heard fabric tear. She yanked it free without slowing, lifting the skirts higher as she ran. The settlement blurred past. Startled faces, someone yelling, a dog barking furiously. She cut between buildings, through someone's yard, scattering chickens that shrieked and flapped. A bullet cracked past her head and splintered wood somewhere to her right. They were shooting at her, actually shooting. Terror gave her speed she didn't know she had. She cleared the last of the buildings and hit open ground, sprinting toward the line of trees maybe 200 yards away. So far. Too far. She'd never make it. Another shot. This one closer. Elena, stop! Marcus's voice surprisingly close. Stop or the next one won't miss. She didn't stop. The trees were 100 yards away. 75. Her lungs burned, her legs screaming. 50 yards. A shot hit the ground just ahead of her, kicking up dirt. Elena veered left, her ankle turning on the uneven ground but holding. 25 yards. Then she was in the trees, branches whipping at her face and arms. She didn't slow down, crashing through underbrush with all the silence of a spooked elk. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit, men shouting to each other, coordinating, spreading out to cut off her escape. Elena ran until her legs gave out, stumbling into a fallen log and going down hard. She lay there gasping, her whole body shaking, listening to the sounds of men getting closer. Northeast. She'd run northeast. Kyle would find her, but would he find her before they did? She forced herself up, looking around wildly for somewhere to hide, somewhere to go. The forest was thick here, but not thick enough. They'd find her in minutes, maybe less. A hand clamped over her mouth. Elena tried to scream, tried to fight, but the grip was iron strong. Then a familiar voice whispered directly in her ear, "Stop. It's me." Kyle. Relief flooded through her so intensely she went limp. He removed his hand from her mouth but kept one arm around her waist, pulling her deeper into the undergrowth with movements so quiet she couldn't believe they were possible while half carrying another person. They crouched behind a massive fallen tree, pressed close together, barely breathing. Elena could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, certain the soldiers would hear it too. Voices called out nearby. "She came this way! Spread out! Find her!" Kyle's hand found Elena's, squeezed once in silent communication. "Stay still. Stay quiet." Two soldiers passed within 10 feet of their hiding spot, so close Elena could see the sweat on their faces. They moved past without seeing, their attention focused ahead. More voices, farther away now. "Nothing here!" "Keep looking." They waited. Minutes stretched like hours. Elena's legs cramped from the awkward crouch, but she didn't dare move. Kyle was absolutely still beside her, his attention focused on the forest around them with that predator awareness she'd come to recognize. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the search began to fade. The soldiers were moving away, searching in the wrong direction. Kyle waited even longer before he moved. When he did, it was with the same careful silence, leading Elena away from their hiding spot in a direction that seemed random, but clearly wasn't. He knew exactly where he was going. They moved for over an hour, stopping frequently to listen, changing direction several times. Elena followed blindly, trusting him completely because she had no other choice. The sun was well past noon when Kyle finally stopped in a rocky area where a small stream tumbled over stones. He knelt beside the water, cupping his hands to drink, and gestured for Elena to do the same. She drank greedily, her throat raw from fear and exertion. When she finally sat back, Kyle was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "Marcus was there, in the store. I don't know if he followed me or if it was coincidence, but..." Elena's voice shook. "He saw me. I ran." "Did you get the information from Brennan first?" "Yes, a new fort 20 miles northeast. They're starting construction next month." Kyle's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Good. That's good. They shot at me." The words came out small, almost childlike. "They actually shot at me." "You're alive, that's what matters." He stood, offering his hand to pull her up. "We need to keep moving. They'll expand the search once they realize they lost you." Elena took his hand, letting him haul her to her feet. "I'm sorry, I should have been more careful." "You got the information, you ran the right direction, you survived." Kyle's voice was matter-of-fact. "That's all I asked for. But they know I'm here now. They'll come looking. They'll find the camp. The camp's already moved. We planned for this." He started walking again, following the stream uphill. "And they don't know where to look. This is a big territory. Marcus won't stop. Brennan said he's obsessed. Let him be obsessed. Men like that make mistakes when they can't control everything." Kyle glanced back at her. "Come on. We've got miles to cover before dark." They walked in silence for a while, climbing steadily into rougher terrain. Elena's dress was in tatters now, the silk torn beyond any hope of repair. She thought about the woman who'd worn this dress at her wedding, how terrified she'd been, how trapped. That woman felt like someone else entirely. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said as they paused to catch their breath on a steep section. "If you must." "Why did you come looking for me? You said you'd wait until sundown, but you came into the settlement. You could have been caught." Kyle was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the trail ahead. "I heard the shots, knew something had gone wrong. You could have just left." "Yes, but you didn't." "No." He met her eyes briefly. "I didn't." "Why?" "Because I'm a fool." He said it without heat, almost with resignation. "Because somewhere in the last few weeks you stopped being a problem I needed to solve and became He cut himself off, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. We need to keep moving. But it did matter. Elena could see it in the way he wouldn't quite look at her, the tension in his shoulders. Something had shifted between them, something neither of them had planned for or wanted. They climbed higher into the mountains as afternoon wore into evening. The temperature dropped and Elena shivered in her ruined dress. Without a word, Kael shrugged out of the jacket he wore and handed it to her. I'm fine, she started to protest. Take it. You're no good to anyone if you freeze. Elena pulled on the jacket, grateful for its warmth. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and something else she couldn't quite name. Something that was distinctly Kael. They made camp that night in a sheltered spot among rocks, again with no fire. Kael shared his food with her, dried meat and some kind of hard bread that tasted better than it had any right to. They ate in silence, both too exhausted for conversation. Get some sleep, Kael said finally. I'll keep watch. You need rest too. I'll sleep when we're back with the others. For now, one of us needs to stay alert. He settled against a rock, his rifle across his lap. Sleep, Elena. She wanted to argue, but her body was already shutting down. She curled up on the hard ground. Kael's jacket pulled tight around her and fell into a dreamless sleep. When she woke, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Kael was still in the same position, still watching, though his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. Did you sleep at all? Elena asked. Some. It was clearly a lie, but she didn't push. How far to the others? If we move fast, we'll reach them by nightfall. They set out immediately, eating as they walked. The terrain was brutal, all steep climbs and treacherous descents, loose scree that slid under their feet. Elena's legs were jelly by mid-morning, but she didn't complain. Kael was moving with the same relentless determination that had defined him from the start, and she'd be damned if she'd be the one to slow them down. Around noon, Kael suddenly stopped, his whole body going tense. Elena froze too, her hand instinctively going to the knife Nakai had given her weeks ago. What is it? She whispered. Horses. Coming fast. He grabbed her arm and pulled her off the trail, down into a dense thicket. Get down. Don't move. They pressed flat against the ground, barely breathing. Within seconds, Elena heard what Kael's sharper senses had already detected. Hoofbeats, multiple riders, moving at speed. Through gaps in the brush, she saw them pass. 8 soldiers, led by Marcus. His face was set in grim determination, his eyes scanning the landscape with methodical precision. She came this way, he was saying to the man beside him. I know she did. The tracks lead into these mountains. Captain, we've been searching for 2 days. Maybe she's alive. And she's not alone. Marcus's voice was cold, certain. Someone helped her in that settlement. Someone's been hiding her. When I find out who, they'll hang. The soldiers passed, their voices fading into the distance. Elena and Kael stayed frozen for long minutes after they'd gone, making sure they were truly alone. Finally, Kael rose, helping Elena up. They're ahead of us now, between us and the camp. What do we do? We go around. It'll take longer, but we don't have a choice. He checked the sun's position. Come on. They altered their route, swinging wide to avoid the patrol. The new path took them through even rougher country, and progress slowed to a crawl. Elena's hands were cut and bleeding from grabbing rocks to steady herself on steep sections. Her feet ached in the ruined moccasins. Every muscle screamed for rest. But Kael kept moving, so she kept moving. Evening was falling when they finally crested a ridge, and Elena saw smoke in the distance. Multiple small fires, carefully placed to be invisible from most angles. The camp. Relief made her knees weak. They'd made it! They descended the final slope as darkness gathered and were met by 2 warriors who'd been standing watch. They spoke rapidly to Kael in their language, gesturing urgently. His expression darkened as he listened. What is it? Elena asked. What's wrong? Cavalry's been spotted closer than we thought. A full company, maybe 30 men, camped just 5 miles from here. Kael's voice was tight. They're boxing us in. How many men do you have? 12 warriors fit to fight, against 30 trained soldiers. He looked at her. Those aren't good odds. They entered the camp to find it in a state of controlled tension. The elders were gathered in quiet discussion. Warriors checked weapons, their faces grim. Women prepared supplies, ready to move again if necessary. Nakai appeared, relief flooding her features when she saw Elena. "You're alive, thank the spirits." "Barely." Elena glanced at Kael, who was already moving toward the Council of Elders. "What's going to happen?" "I don't know, but it's not good." Nakai pulled Elena toward the medical tent. "Come, let me see to those hands." As Nakai cleaned and wrapped Elena's cut palms, voices rose from the council gathering. Elena couldn't understand most of what was being said, but the tone was clear. Argument, disagreement, fear. "What are they saying?" she asked. Naki worked in silence for a moment before answering. "Some want to run. Pack up now, tonight, and disappear deeper into the mountains before the soldiers find us." She tied off the bandage with more force than necessary. "Others want to stand and fight. Make the soldiers pay for every inch of ground." "What does Kael want?" "Kael wants to protect his people. But he's torn. Running means losing this territory, maybe forever. Fighting means people die, maybe all of us." Nakai met Elena's eyes. "There's no good choice here. Only less terrible ones." The council broke up without resolution, people dispersing to their tents with troubled faces. Kael walked past without acknowledging Elena, his shoulders tight with tension. Kai found Elena later, curling up beside her with a child's need for comfort. "Scared," she whispered in her limited English. "Me too," Elena admitted, holding the girl close. They sat together as full darkness fell, the camp settling into an uneasy quiet. Elena could hear people talking in low voices, the occasional sound of a child crying, the normal sounds of life continuing despite the threat hanging over them all. She thought about Marcus, camped somewhere out there in the darkness, planning his next move. She thought about her father, probably coordinating with the army, using his resources to find her. She thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. Her flight from the wedding, Kael's decision to spare her, her choice to stay. And she thought about what Nakai had said. Identity wasn't built in one grand gesture, but in small choices, day after day. Elena had been making those small choices for weeks now, learning to listen to the land, learning to make fire and track animals, and speak a new language. Learning to see these people not as the savage threat her father had described, but as families and individuals trying to survive in a world that wanted them erased. Tomorrow, she might have to make the biggest choice yet. Kael appeared out of the darkness, his form barely visible. "Elena, come with me." She extracted herself from Kai, tucking the child into the blankets, and followed Kael away from the tents. They walked in silence until they were well outside the camp perimeter, the voices behind them fading to nothing. "The council wants to run," Kael said abruptly. "They say fighting is suicide." "But you disagree." "I think running just delays the inevitable. They'll find us eventually, and when they do, we'll be scattered, weak, easy to destroy one group at a time." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture betraying his frustration. "But I also think standing and fighting against those odds is asking people to die for pride, for principle. What do the warriors want? To fight. They're young, most of them. They think courage can overcome bullets." His voice was bitter. "I thought that way too once, before I learned what bullets actually do to bodies." Elena waited, sensing he needed to talk this through more than he needed answers. "If we run, we lose this land. This territory has sustained my people for generations. The water sources, the hunting grounds, we know every inch of it. Giving that up means starting over somewhere else, probably pushing into another group's territory, creating new conflicts." He turned to face her. "But if we fight and lose, everyone dies. The children, the elders, all of it." "There's no good answer," Elena said quietly. "No, there isn't." He was silent for a moment. "You could leave, go back to Marcus, tell him you were held captive. He'd believe it. You'd be safe. Is that what you want me to do?" "What I want doesn't matter." "Answer the question anyway." Kael looked at her for a long moment, and in the moonlight his face was unguarded in a way she'd never seen. "No," he said finally. "I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay and help us figure out how to survive this. I want—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "It doesn't matter what I want." Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear he was trying so hard to hide. It matters to me. Why? You barely know us, barely know me. A few weeks doesn't... I know enough. Elena cut him off. I know you're the most stubborn, frustrating man I've ever met. I know you're carrying weight that would break most people and you just keep going. I know you saved my life when you had every reason not to. And I know that when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I ever did in my father's house, or at that wedding, or any of the life I left behind. Cale stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. Elena, I'm not leaving, she said firmly. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you decide to do, I'm staying. You're stuck with me. You might die. Then I'll die fighting for something I chose, something that matters. She met his eyes without flinching. That's more than most people get. Cale closed the distance between them in one step, and then his hands were in her hair and his mouth was on hers, fierce and desperate, and nothing like the cold, possessive kiss Marcus had given her at the altar. This was heat and want and fear and need all tangled together. Elena kissed him back with everything she had, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. For a moment the world narrowed to just this. Just them. Just now. Everything else falling away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he said roughly. Probably. If we survive this, my people are going to have opinions about me and the daughter of Samuel Cross. Let them have opinions. Elena's voice was fierce. I stopped caring about other people's opinions when I ran from that church. Cale laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. You're going to be nothing but trouble, aren't you? Absolutely. He kissed her again, slower this time, and Elena felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like home in a way she'd never experienced before. When they finally pulled apart, Cale's expression had shifted back to the hard determination she recognized. I need to make a decision. About tomorrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we don't have enough warriors to win a straight fight, but we know this territory better than they do. We know where the narrow passes are, where the ground is unstable, where we can turn their numbers against them. He looked toward the camp. It's risky. People could still die, but it gives us better odds than either running or meeting them head on. A trap. Exactly. Cale started walking back toward camp, Elena beside him. I'll need to convince the council. Some of them will argue for running no matter what, but if I can show them a real plan, something with actual chance of success, they'll listen, Elena said. They trust you. They trusted my father too, right up until his choices got him killed. You're not your father. Cale glanced at her, something like gratitude in his eyes. No, I'm not. They reached the camp to find people still awake, unable to sleep with the threat hanging over them. Cale called the elders and warriors together again, and this time Elena watched as he laid out his plan with calm authority. He spoke in their language, but she caught enough words to follow the basics. A narrow canyon to the east, where the cavalry would have to string out single file. Warriors positioned above on both sides, rocks ready to trigger a slide that would block escape routes. It wasn't about killing all the soldiers. It was about making the cost of pursuing them too high, making this territory too dangerous to be worth the army's effort. Arguments erupted immediately. Too risky. Too many variables. What if the soldiers didn't take the bait? But one of the older warriors, the scarred one who'd been there the day they found Elena, spoke up. He talked for several minutes, gesturing emphatically, and slowly the other warriors began to nod. Nakai appeared at Elena's elbow. He's reminding them that Kael's strategies have kept them alive this long, that running has never solved anything permanently, that if they're going to make a stand, better to do it on ground they choose. The debate continued for another hour, voices rising and falling, but Elena could sense the tide turning. Kael stood at the center of it all, answering questions, addressing concerns, never losing patience even when the same objections were raised multiple times. Finally, one of the eldest women, someone Kael clearly respected deeply, spoke. The camp fell silent as she talked, her voice carrying weight despite its quietness. When she finished, she looked at Kael and nodded once. The decision was made. They would fight. The rest of the night was spent in preparation. Warriors checked weapons, gathered ammunition, prepared the supplies they'd need. The women and children would be moved to a more defensible position, well away from the fighting, with a guard to protect them if things went wrong. Elena found herself caught up in the work, helping where she could. No one questioned her presence anymore. Somewhere in the chaos of the last 2 days, she'd crossed from outsider to something else. Not quite one of them, maybe, but no longer separate either. As dawn approached, the warriors prepared to move out. Kyle was with them, his rifle slung across his back, his face set in those hard lines Elena recognized. "Be careful," she said, catching his arm. "That's the plan." He pulled her close briefly, his hand cupping the back of her head. "If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, Nakai knows where to take everyone. She'll get you to safety." "I don't want safety. I want you to come back." Kale kissed her hard, quick, then pulled away. "Then I'll do my best." Elena watched him go, her heart in her throat. The warriors moved out in silence, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness like ghosts. Nakai organized the evacuation of the camp, moving people quickly and quietly to the fallback position. Elena helped, carrying supplies, guiding children, doing whatever was needed. Kai stuck close to her side, her small hand tight in Elena's. They reached the defensible position, a cave system in the rocks, just as the sun broke the horizon. From here they'd wait. Either the warriors would return victorious or they wouldn't return at all. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The children grew restless, had to be kept quiet. The women worked to keep busy, mending, preparing food, anything to keep their hands occupied and their minds from imagining the worst. Elena sat with Kai, teaching her English words to pass the time. "Bird," she'd say, pointing at one overhead. "Sky, stone, water." Kai repeated them dutifully, but her attention kept drifting toward the direction the warriors had gone. It was midday when they heard it, distant gunfire, the sound echoing off canyon walls in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint the direction. Then more shots, sustained, the crack of rifles mixing with shouts they couldn't quite make out. Everyone froze, listening. The shooting went on for what felt like forever, but was probably only minutes. Then a massive rumbling sound like thunder, but deeper, more sustained. The rock slide Kyle had planned. Then silence. The silence was worse than the gunfire. They waited. An hour, 2. The sun climbed higher and still no one came. Elena's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, trying to still them, but it didn't work. Beside her, Kai had gone very quiet, her small face pale. Then finally, movement on the ridge above. Warriors, moving fast, helping wounded companions. Elena was on her feet before she could think, scanning the group desperately for Kael's tall form. She counted them. 8 warriors, 9, 10. 12 total had gone out. Where were the other 2? The warriors came down into the cave system, their faces grim but not defeated. The wounded were taken immediately to where Nakai had set up her medical supplies. People crowded around, asking questions, looking for their loved ones. Elena pushed through the crowd, still searching. Then she saw him, Kael, helping another warrior who was limping badly, blood soaking through a bandage on his leg. Kael himself had a cut across his cheek, his shirt torn, but he was walking, talking, alive. Relief hit Elena so hard she almost fell. She made her way to him as he lowered the wounded warrior to the ground for Nakai to treat. "You're okay," she said, her voice shaking. "More or less." Kael straightened, wincing slightly. "The others?" 2 didn't make it back. His face closed off, pain flashing across it before the hard mask came back. "Who?" One of the warriors answered in their language, and Kael's jaw tightened. He nodded once, then turned and walked away toward the back of the cave, his shoulders rigid. Elena followed him, giving him space but not leaving him alone. He stopped at the farthest point, where the cave narrowed into darkness, and stood there with his head bowed. "We won," he said after a long silence. "The cavalry retreated, lost 6 men to our 2. By any measure, it was a success." "But you lost people." "I lost people." His voice was flat. "I always lose people. That's what leadership means. Deciding who dies." Elena moved closer, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "You gave them a choice. They chose to fight." "I presented the option. I convinced them it was the right move. That's not the same as choice." "Yes, it is. They could have voted to run. They didn't." Cale turned to look at her, and his eyes were red-rimmed. You don't understand. You've never had to. No, I haven't. You're right. Elena cut him off gently. But I understand enough to know that you did everything you could, that your plan worked, that more people survived because of you than would have otherwise. That's supposed to make it better? No, nothing makes it better. But it's the truth. Cale stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her against him, his arms tight around her. Elena held him back, feeling the tension in his body, the grief he was trying so hard to control. They stood like that until Nakai's voice called from the front of the cave. Kyle, you need to see this. They hurried back to find everyone gathered around the cave entrance, looking out at the landscape below. In the distance, moving away toward the southeast, was a column of cavalry, the remnants of Marcus's company, retreating. They're leaving, one of the warriors said, satisfaction in his voice. Running back to the fort. For now, Kyle said. They'll be back, with more men, better supplies, new strategies. But not today, Nakai said firmly. Today, we won. Let that be enough. Around them, people were beginning to celebrate, quietly, mindful of the two who wouldn't celebrate with them, but with genuine relief. They'd survived. They'd defended their land. That was worth something. Elena stood beside Kyle, watching the cavalry disappear into the distance. Somewhere in that column was Marcus, probably furious at the defeat, probably already planning his next move. And somewhere beyond that was her father, still pulling strings, still trying to control outcomes. But for the first time since fleeing that wedding, Elena didn't feel afraid of them. She'd faced them, faced their guns and their pursuit and their determination, and she'd survived. More than survived. She'd found something worth fighting for. Cale's hand found hers, squeezing gently. You know they'll come after you again. Marcus won't give up. Your father won't either. Let them come, Elena said. I'm not running anymore. The days after the battle moved in a strange rhythm, part celebration, part mourning, part exhausted recovery. They buried the two fallen warriors in the traditional way, high on a ridge where the wind would carry their spirits. Elena stood with the others during the ceremony, understanding perhaps a third of what was said, but feeling the weight of every word. Cale spoke at the burial, his voice steady despite the grief carved into his face. Elena watched him carry that burden the way he carried everything else, with a grim determination that refused to break even when it probably should have. Afterward, as people dispersed back to the work of rebuilding, Elena found herself walking beside the scarred warrior who'd spoken up during the council. His name was Dakota, she'd learned, and he'd known Kyle since they were children. You fight well, Dakota said in careful English, for someone who didn't know which end of a rifle to hold 2 months ago. Elena glanced at him, surprised. I didn't fight. I hid in a cave with the children. You fought before that. In the settlement. When you ran from your husband. When you chose to come back instead of taking the easy way. Dakota's scarred face creased into something that might have been a smile. That takes a different kind of courage, the kind Kyle needs beside him. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Dakota stopped walking, turning to face her. Kyle carries too much alone. Always has. He thinks showing weakness makes him a bad leader, so he never shows it, never shares the burden. He gestured back toward where Kyle stood by the graves, alone even surrounded by people. But you see through that. You don't let him hide. I'm not sure he'd agree with that assessment. He doesn't have to agree. It's still true. Dakota resumed walking. The council has been talking about you, about what happens next. Elena's stomach tightened. And there are different opinions. Some think you should leave before you bring more trouble. Others think you've earned a place here. He paused. What do you think? I think I don't want to leave, but I also think I don't want to be the reason more people die. Good answer. Shows you're thinking about others, not just yourself. Dakota nodded slowly. Your father is a problem. The cavalry is a problem. As long as you're here, they'll keep coming. That's reality. I know. But they'll keep coming anyway, whether you're here or not. Your father wants this land. The army wants to expand. You're just an excuse. He met her eyes. So the question isn't whether you staying causes problems. The question is whether you staying is worth it despite the problems. And what's your answer? I think Kyle fought harder yesterday than I've seen him fight in years. I think he had something to fight for beyond duty and obligation. Dakota's expression softened slightly. That's worth something. Maybe worth everything. He walked away before Elena could respond, leaving her standing there with her thoughts churning. The camp slowly returned to something approaching normal over the next week. The wounded healed under Nakai's care. The scouts reported that the cavalry had indeed retreated to the fort, licking their wounds. There were no immediate signs of another attack, but everyone knew it was temporary. Marcus wouldn't give up. Her father wouldn't stop. The army's expansion wouldn't halt just because one ambush had succeeded. Elena threw herself into work, helping rebuild what had been left behind during the evacuation, learning new skills from anyone willing to teach her. She worked alongside the women processing hides, grinding corn, repairing clothing. Her hands grew calloused, her back stronger, her understanding of their language deeper. Kai became her constant shadow, chattering in a mix of languages that Elena was increasingly able to follow. The child had apparently decided that Elena belonged to her, and Elena found she didn't mind. There was something uncomplicated about Kai's affection, something pure that didn't require proving or earning. One evening, as Elena helped Kai's mother prepare food, the woman spoke quietly. "My daughter loves you, talks about you constantly." "She's easy to love," Elena said. "She lost her father last year." Thickness. Kai's mother, her name was Aida, stirred the pot over the fire with mechanical precision. "She doesn't remember him much anymore. Too young. But she knows something is missing. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, just—" Aida looked at her directly. "Just don't leave without saying goodbye. If you leave. Children don't understand why people disappear. They just know it hurts." The weight of that responsibility settled over Elena. She'd been so focused on her own survival, her own choices, that she hadn't fully considered what it meant to become part of other people's lives, to matter to them in ways that could cause pain. "I won't leave without saying goodbye," Elena promised. "If I leave at all." Aida nodded, satisfied, and went back to cooking. That night, Elena found Kyle standing watch at the camp's edge, staring out at the darkness. She approached quietly, and he turned at her footstep, his posture relaxing when he recognized her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much thinking." Elena settled beside him on the rock he'd claimed. "You? Someone needs to keep watch. You have warriors doing that. You're just avoiding rest." Kale's mouth quirked slightly. "You're getting too good at reading me." "Not that hard. You're not as complicated as you think you are." "No? What am I then?" Elena considered the question seriously. "You're someone who cares so much it terrifies you, so you pretend you don't care at all, and then you work yourself to death trying to protect people while insisting it's just duty." Kale was quiet for a long moment. "That's uncomfortably accurate. I had a good teacher in emotional avoidance. My father perfected the art." Elena pulled her knees to her chest. He cared about his legacy, his power, his vision of how the world should work. But people, actual human beings with their own wants and needs, those were just obstacles or tools. "I'm nothing like your father." "I know, that's my point." She glanced at him. "You care about people first. Everything else is just strategy for keeping them safe. Your father cared about power first, big difference. My father cared about keeping the peace, about avoiding conflict. Is that what you really think, or what you've been telling yourself?" Kale's jaw tightened. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying maybe your father wasn't weak. Maybe he was just scared. Maybe he cared about people too, but he didn't know how to protect them without giving ground. And maybe you're so terrified of becoming him that you've swung too far the other direction. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not. But I know what it's like to define yourself in opposition to a parent. To be so determined not to be them that you can't see when you're making different mistakes for the same reasons." Kale stood abruptly, his whole body tense. "This conversation is over." "Why? Because I'm getting too close to something true? Because you've been here 2 months and you think you understand everything about me, about my choices, about what I've had to do? I don't think I understand everything, but I understand enough to see that you're exhausted, that you're carrying weight that's going to break you eventually if you don't let anyone help. I don't need help. Everyone needs help. That's what makes us human." Kyle turned on her, his eyes blazing. You want to know what makes us human? Surviving when everything wants you dead, fighting when the odds say you should give up, watching people you love die and getting up the next day anyway. That's what makes us human, not this naive idea that we can all just lean on each other and everything will be fine. I never said everything would be fine. I said, you don't have to do it alone. Yes, I do. Because when I make a mistake, when I choose wrong, people die. Not might die. Die. Actually, finally, permanently die. His voice cracked slightly. I can't share that burden. I can't ask anyone else to help carry that weight because it's not fair to them. And it's fair to you? It doesn't matter if it's fair, it's necessary. Elena stood too, closing the distance between them. You're right that leadership means making impossible choices. But it doesn't mean suffering alone. It doesn't mean pushing away everyone who cares about you because you're afraid you'll let them down. I'm not afraid. You're terrified. Of me, specifically. Because if you let yourself actually care about someone, if you let yourself be happy for 1 second, you think it means you're betraying everyone who's died, everyone you couldn't save. Kyle stared at her, his breathing ragged, and for a moment Elena thought he might actually hit something, but then the fight went out of him all at once, his shoulders sagging. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. I don't know how to be what my people need, and also be... He gestured vaguely between them. This, whatever this is. Maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe you can be both. And what happens when being one conflicts with being the other? When I have to make a choice that keeps my people safe but hurts you? Then you make that choice and we deal with it. Elena took his hand. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm not asking you to put me before your responsibilities. I'm just asking you to stop pushing me away because you're scared. Cale pulled her against him, his arms tight around her, his face buried in her hair. I am scared, terrified. I haven't felt this way since... He cut himself off. Since your wife. Yes, the word was barely audible. And when she died, when I lost her, and our child both, I thought I'd die too. Wanted to, for a while. The only thing that kept me going was knowing my people needed me, that I couldn't afford to break. So you locked everything away, made yourself hard enough to survive anything. It worked. I survived. But surviving isn't the same as living. Cale pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching her face. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just someone who spent her whole life surviving instead of living, and I'm tired of it. Elena touched his face gently. I want more than that. And I think you do too, even if it scares you. It terrifies me. Good. Me too. We can be terrified together. Kyle laughed, the sound surprised and genuine and utterly unlike his usual careful control. Then he kissed her, and Elena felt something in her chest crack open, not breaking, but expanding, making room for something she'd never allowed herself before. Hope. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other under the stars. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools. The council's going to have strong opinions about this, Kyle said. Let them. Your father is going to lose his mind when he finds out. He already lost it when I ran. This is just adding insult to injury. Marcus won't give up. He'll keep coming. Then we'll keep fighting him off. Elena's voice was steady, certain. Together. Cale studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Together. The next few weeks brought a deceptive calm. The scouts reported continued cavalry activity around the fort, but no major movements toward their territory. It seemed the army was content to regroup and plan rather than rush into another confrontation. Elena used the time to deepen her integration into the community. She learned to shoot properly, Kyle teaching her with the same relentless standards he applied to everything. She learned to track game with Dakota, to read weather signs with the elders, to treat minor injuries with Nakai. The work was hard, the learning curve steep, but Elena absorbed it all with fierce determination. This was her life now. These were her people. She needed to be useful, to contribute, to earn her place not through Kyle's protection, but through her own skills. One afternoon, as she practiced tracking in the foothills with Dakota, They came across something that made both of them freeze. Fresh tracks. Horses. Multiple riders, moving carefully, trying to avoid leaving obvious trails. How many? Elena whispered. Dakota crouched, examining the prints with careful attention. 4? Maybe 5. Moving north. He looked up at her, his face grim. Scouts. Your people. They hurried back to camp, Dakota moving fast despite his limp from an old injury. Cale listened to their report with his expression locked down tight, already thinking 3 steps ahead. They're mapping our territory, he said, learning our patterns, preparing for another push. How long do we have? Nakai asked. Days, maybe a week? Kyle looked around at the gathered warriors. We can't ambush them again the same way. They'll expect it. We need a different strategy. Or we negotiate, one of the elders said. Send someone to talk to them. Explain that we want peace. They don't want peace. They want land. Our land. Cale's voice was flat. Negotiation is just another way of saying surrender. Not if we have leverage. Everyone turned to look at Elena. She hadn't meant to speak, but now that she had, the idea crystallized in her mind. I'm the leverage, she said. Marcus wants me back. My father wants me back. They've been searching for weeks. If I offer to return No. Kael's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. Hear me out. If I go back, I can negotiate terms, use myself as a bargaining chip to get them to leave this territory alone. They'll never agree to that. They'll just take you and continue their expansion. Maybe, but maybe not. My father wants his reputation intact. Right now, his daughter's disappearance is a scandal. If I return willingly, agree to keep quiet about everything, he might consider it a fair trade. You're talking about sacrificing yourself. I'm talking about using the only card we have that they actually want. Elena looked around at the gathered faces. You've all risked everything for me. Let me risk something for you. The argument that erupted was immediate and fierce. Some thought Elena's plan had merit. Others thought it was suicide. Cale shut down the whole discussion with a curt command that brooked no argument, and the council dispersed in unhappy tension. Elena followed Kyle back to his tent, knowing he'd want to continue the fight in private. You're not doing this, he said the moment they were alone. It's not your choice. Like hell it's not. I'm responsible for everyone here, including me? Do I not get a say in my own decisions? Kyle turned on her. You have no idea what you're suggesting. Marcus won't just take you back and resume the marriage like nothing happened. He'll punish you for the embarrassment, for running, for the soldiers who died trying to find you. And your father, his voice was rough. Your father will lock you away somewhere you can never escape again. I know the risks. Then why would you even consider it? Because I've watched your people live in fear for weeks. Because I've watched children pack up their homes in the middle of the night. Because 2 warriors died in a fight that happened because of me. Elena's voice shook but held steady. Because I care about these people. And if there's a chance, even a small one, that I can protect them, I have to try. There are other ways. Name one. Cale opened his mouth, then closed it again, frustration written across his face. You can't, can you? Because there aren't other ways, not real ones. Elena moved closer. This is my choice. Mine. You don't get to take that from me just because you're afraid of losing me. Damn right I'm afraid of losing you. He stopped, struggling with the words. I just found you. I know, but this isn't about us. It's bigger than us. Maybe I don't want it to be bigger. Maybe I want to be selfish just this once. Elena felt her heart crack at the raw honesty in his voice. Then be selfish. Tell me not to go. Tell me you need me to stay and I will. Cale stared at her, the internal war visible on his face. Elena watched him struggle, watched him try to choose between what he wanted and what he thought was right. Finally, he spoke. I can't do that. I can't ask you to ignore what you think is right just to make me happy. Why not? Because that's not who you are anymore. You're not the woman who let other people make her choices. You're not someone who can be owned or controlled or told what to do. His voice was rough with emotion. You're someone who stands up and fights, even when it's terrifying, especially when it's terrifying. And He took a shaky breath. I love you for that. Even when I hate it. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and undeniable. You love me, Elena repeated softly. Yes. For all the good it does either of us. Elena crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. Say it again. Elena. Say it again, not angry or frustrated, just the truth. Kael's hands came up to cover hers, his eyes closing briefly. When he opened them again, they were clearer than she'd ever seen them. I love you, he said quietly. I love your courage and your stubbornness and the way you refuse to let me hide behind my responsibilities. I love that you see me, actually see me, and don't look away from the hard parts. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And I'm terrified that loving you means losing you. I love you too, Elena said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Which is why I have to do this right. Not just run away and hope it works out. Actually face this and end it properly. There has to be another way. If there is, we haven't found it, and we're running out of time. They stood there in the tent, foreheads pressed together, both of them breathing unsteadily. Elena felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her, but also a strange clarity. This was the right thing, the only thing that made sense. If I do this, she said slowly, I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you won't come after me if it goes wrong. Don't risk your people trying to rescue me. Don't let this become another fight that gets people killed. I can't promise that. Kael said, No, you don't get to make me promise to abandon you. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. But I need to know that if I do this, it ends the cycle. No more fighting, no more deaths. Just peace, or as close to peace as we can get. Kael pulled back to look at her, his eyes blazing. You're asking me to let you walk into a trap and do nothing if they hurt you. I'm asking you to trust that I can handle myself, and to put your people first, the way you always have. You are my people now. You're one of us. The simple declaration hit Elena harder than she expected. Then trust me to protect us, the same way you protect us. They argued for another hour, neither willing to give ground, until finally exhaustion won and they collapsed into uneasy sleep in each other's arms. The next morning, Elena woke to find Kael already gone and Nakai sitting at the tent entrance waiting for her. The council met at dawn, Nakai said without preamble. They voted. It was close, but they've agreed to let you try negotiation, with conditions. What conditions? You don't go alone. Kael and 2 warriors will accompany you to the meeting point. If anything seems wrong, they pull you out immediately. And you negotiate in neutral territory, not at the fort. Nakai's eyes were serious. They also want you to understand. If you go back with Marcus, they won't come for you. Can't risk it. You'll be on your own. Elena nodded slowly. She'd expected as much. When? 3 days. That's how long it'll take to arrange the meeting through back channels. Brennan will help set it up. Nakai stood. Kael's angry. Fair warning. She found him at the practice range, firing arrows into a target with mechanical precision. Each shot landed dead center. The arrows clustering so tightly, they split each other's shafts. I hear the council voted, Elena said. Kael loosed another arrow. They did. Against my recommendation. You can't protect everyone from their own choices. I can try. Another arrow, another perfect shot. 3 days. Then you meet with Marcus and your father and you try to negotiate something that has no chance of working. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I know men like them. They don't negotiate. They dictate terms and call it compromise. He finally turned to look at her. But the council has spoken, and you've made your choice. So we'll do this your way and hope I'm wrong. I need you to believe in me. I believe in you. I just don't believe in them. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Nakai taught Elena what to say and what not to say, how to read the negotiation, when to push and when to yield. Dakota showed her how to look for escape routes, just in case. Kael was quiet and distant, throwing himself into work with even more intensity than usual. The night before the meeting, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in her tent staring at the canvas above, her mind running through every possible outcome. The tent flap opened and Kyle entered, moving quietly despite his size. He settled beside her without speaking, and Elena reached for his hand. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. You should be." "Not helping." "I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to be honest." He squeezed her hand. "I'm scared too. More scared than I've been since Amma died." I'm not going to die. You don't know that. Neither do you." They lay there in silence for a while, hands clasped, both of them thinking too much to speak. "If this works," Kyle said finally, "if you actually manage to negotiate peace." "What then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, where does that leave us? If the cavalry leaves this territory alone, if your father backs off, you're still legally married to Marcus. You're still Samuel Cross's daughter. There's no version of this where we get to just," he struggled for words, "be together, not publicly, not without consequences." Elena hadn't let herself think that far ahead. "I don't know. Maybe we figure it out as we go. That's not much of a plan. It's the only plan I have right now." Kyle rolled onto his side, pulling her against him. "I want you to know, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you decide, I don't regret this. Any of this. Meeting you, teaching you, falling in love with you, none of it. That sounds like goodbye. It's not. It's just, in case I don't get to say it later, I needed you to know." Elena turned in his arms, finding his mouth in the darkness. They made love slowly, carefully, as if trying to memorize every moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Elena felt tears slide down her face, even though she wasn't quite sure why. "Don't cry," Kyle whispered, wiping them away. "Can't help it." "Try. You need to be strong tomorrow. Can't negotiate from a position of weakness." "Is that what this is? Weakness?" "No. It's being human, but they don't need to see that part." Elena nodded against his chest and forced herself to stop crying. Tomorrow she'd need to be strong. Tonight she could be weak. Morning came too fast. Elena dressed in her ruined wedding dress one more time. Nakai had cleaned and mended it as much as possible, but it was still obviously damaged. The message was deliberate. "I am not the same woman who wore this before." Kyle, Dakota, and another warrior named Neshoba rode with her toward the arranged meeting point, a flat clearing halfway between the camp and the fort. Brennan had arranged everything through his contacts, passing messages back and forth until both sides agreed to terms. They arrived first, which gave them the advantage of choosing positions. Kyle immediately started assessing angles and escape routes, his tactical mind never resting. "They'll come from the south," he said, pointing, "probably with at least a dozen men, even though the agreement was for 5. "Do we run if they bring more?" "We see what they want first. Could be just a show of force." His eyes scanned the horizon. "But stay ready to move." They didn't have to wait long. Within 20 minutes, riders appeared from the south, and Kale had been right. There were at least 15, maybe more, arranged in a loose formation. At the center, riding a black horse with perfect military bearing, was Marcus. Elena's stomach twisted. She hadn't seen him since running from the store, and the sight of him brought back every fear she'd fled from. But she forced herself to stay calm, to remember what Nakai had taught her. Show no weakness. Name your terms first. Never apologize. The cavalry company stopped about 50 yards away, and Marcus rode forward alone. Kyle tensed beside Elena, his hand on his rifle. "Easy," Elena murmured. "Let me handle this." She urged her horse forward, meeting Marcus in the middle of the clearing. Up close, she could see the anger in his eyes, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "Elena," he said, his voice cool and level. "You look different." "I am different." "So I see. The wedding dress is a nice touch, very dramatic." "I'm not here for drama. I'm here to negotiate." Marcus's eyebrow raised slightly. "Negotiate what exactly?" "My return, in exchange for guarantees that this territory will be left alone. No more expansion, no more patrols, no more surveying for forts." "You think very highly of yourself if you believe you're worth all that." "I think you've spent weeks searching for me. I think my father has called in every favor he has to track me down. I think the scandal of your missing wife is threatening both your careers." Elena kept her voice steady. So, yes, I think I'm worth it. The question is whether you agree. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Your father wants you back. He's made that very clear, and I want what I paid for. A wife, an alliance, the respectability that comes with it. You'll have it. I'll return. I'll play the role of dutiful wife in public. I'll attend the right parties and say the right things. Your reputation stays intact. And in private? In private, we have a practical arrangement. You get the social benefits. I get freedom to live my life without constant surveillance. We're civil, cordial even, but we don't pretend it's anything more than what it is. You want to negotiate the terms of our marriage. I want to acknowledge the reality of our marriage. You don't love me, I don't love you. Let's at least be honest about that and work from there. Marcus was quiet, his face unreadable. And the territory? You think I can just order the army to leave this whole region alone? I think you have more influence than you pretend. I think my father has more leverage than he's used. Between the two of you, you could make it happen if you wanted to badly enough. And what's to stop these people from expanding their own territory? From raiding settlements? From being the savages everyone claims they are? Elena felt anger flare but forced it down. They're not savages. They're people trying to survive in land that's been theirs for generations. If you stop pushing them into smaller and smaller areas, stop cutting them off from water and hunting grounds, they have no reason to raid anything. You sound like you've gone native. I sound like someone who's seen both sides and realizes the problem isn't them or us. It's the lie that we can't coexist. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You've changed more than I thought. Yes, and you need to decide if you can accept that or if we're both wasting our time here. For a long moment, Marcus just looked at her. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, not warmly, but with a kind of grudging respect. I underestimated you, he said. I thought you were just a frightened girl who panicked. I see now you're something else entirely. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. I need to consult with your father, get his agreement on the terms, but… He paused. I'm not opposed to the arrangement you're suggesting. It's practical, if nothing else. When will you have an answer? 2 days. We'll meet here again. Same conditions. Marcus glanced past her toward where Kael sat on his horse, watching. That's your new protector? That's none of your business. It is if you're still my wife. Our arrangement is public appearances and mutual respect for privacy. What I do in my private time isn't part of the negotiation. Marcus's smile turned sharp. We'll see about that. 2 days, Elena. Don't make me hunt you down again. He turned his horse and rode back to his men. Elena waited until they'd started back toward the fort before returning to Kael. How did it go? He asked. Better than expected. He's considering it. Needs to talk to my father first. And you trust him to come back with a real offer? I don't trust him at all. But I think he wants this resolved as much as we do. The searching has been expensive and embarrassing. If I offer him an out that saves face, he might take it. They rode back to camp in silence, Elena turning the conversation over in her mind. Marcus had seemed almost reasonable, which worried her more than if he'd been openly hostile. Men like him were most dangerous when they were being accommodating. The next 2 days crawled by. Elena tried to stay busy, but her mind kept returning to the upcoming meeting, running through scenarios and possibilities until she was dizzy with them. Kael was tense too, barely sleeping, constantly checking the perimeter. The whole camp felt like a held breath, waiting to see what would happen. When the day finally came, Elena dressed in clean clothes Nakai had prepared. Simple, but well made, a compromise between her old world and her new one. Kael helped her mount her horse, his hands lingering on hers. Whatever happens, he said quietly, remember, you have a choice. Always. You can walk away from this at any moment. I know. Do you? Because I need you to know, actually know, not just say, that I won't think less of you if you decide this isn't worth it. If you choose to run instead of negotiate. If you choose yourself over all of this. Elena touched his face gently. I'm not choosing myself. I'm choosing us. All of us. That includes you. I wish it didn't have to. Me too. They rode to the meeting point to find Marcus already waiting, this time with only 3 men as agreed. That was a good sign, Elena thought. He was taking the negotiations seriously. She rode forward alone this time, Kael having argued against it, but ultimately accepting her decision. Marcus dismounted when she approached, a formal gesture that surprised her. Elena, thank you for coming. Do you have an answer? I do. But first, there's something you need to understand. He gestured to one of his men, who brought forward a leather satchel. Your father wants you back. Desperately. He's offered a substantial reward for your return, no questions asked about where you've been. And he's also prepared to use every resource at his disposal to destroy anyone who helped you. He knows you've been with the hostiles. He wants names, locations, everything. Marcus pulled a document from the satchel. This is a signed order authorizing a full military campaign against any native groups found in this territory. Scorched earth. No mercy. Elena felt ice settle in her stomach. He'd do that? He's already done it. This order is dated 3 days ago. He's given me 6 months to either bring you back or eliminate the problem of native resistance in this region. Those are my only options. Unless we negotiate something better. Something that gives him what he wants while avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. Marcus held up the document. I can bury this order, say the situation resolved itself, but only if you come back now, willingly, and stick to the story we agree on. What story? That you were taken by hostiles, held captive. That I led a daring rescue and saved you. It plays well, makes me look heroic. Gives your father a narrative that doesn't embarrass him. Allows you to return without scandal. And the native groups? The territory? Declared off limits for expansion. For now. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10. Long enough for attention to shift elsewhere, for other priorities to take precedence. Marcus's voice was businesslike. It's the best deal you're going to get. Take it, or watch your friends be hunted down systematically. Elena stared at him, her mind racing. It was a trap, obviously. But it was also probably the only real offer she'd get. Marcus was right. Her father's pride and anger would drive him to destroy everything if she didn't give him a way to save face. I need guarantees, in writing. You'll have them. Treaties, official orders, whatever documentation you want. But Elena, Marcus stepped closer. You need to understand that this only works if you commit completely. No running again. No secret contacts with your former captors. You come back, you stay back. You live the life we agreed to. Can you do that? Elena thought about Kael, waiting back at the camp. About Kai and Nakai and Dakota and all the others who'd become her family. About the life she'd started to build in the desert, the person she'd started to become. Could she leave all that? Lock it away and pretend it never happened? I need to think about it, she said. You have until sunset tomorrow. After that, the order stands and we begin the campaign. Marcus mounted his horse. Choose wisely, Elena. This isn't just about you anymore. He rode away, leaving Elena alone in the clearing with her impossible choice. She returned to camp in a daze, barely aware of the ride. Kael was waiting, his face tense. What did he say? Elena told him everything, the order, the ultimatum, the 5 or 10 years of protection in exchange for her return. She watched his face close off as she spoke, the walls going back up. So you have to go back, he said flatly when she finished. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. There's no maybe about it. If you don't, he destroys us. Simple as that. It's not simple. Yes, it is. Kael's voice was harsh. You go back, we survive. You stay, we all die. That's the choice. Everything else is just noise. Don't do that. Don't pretend you don't care what happens to me. I care. That's why I'm telling you to go. He turned away. You were right from the start. You being here puts everyone at risk. This is just making it official. Elena felt something break in her chest. You don't mean that. I mean every word. Go back to your husband. Live your comfortable life. Forget about us. I can't forget. You will, eventually. It's what people do. They move on. Kael's shoulders were rigid. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the camp without looking back. Elena stood there, tears streaming down her face, until Nakai found her. He doesn't mean it, the older woman said gently. He's just trying to make it easier for you to leave. Well, it's not working. Come, sit. Let's think this through together. They sat by a small fire, and Nakai listened as Elena poured out everything, her fears, her hopes, her impossible position. When she finally ran out of words, Nakai was quiet for a long time. "Can I tell you a story?" the older woman said finally. "If you want." "When I was young, maybe your age, I fell in love with a man from another group. Different customs, different language, different everything. My family said I couldn't marry him. His family said the same. We had two choices: run away together and lose both our families, or accept it and move on." "What did you do?" "I chose my family, let him go. It hurt worse than anything I'd experienced before." Nakai stirred the fire with a stick. "But here's what I learned. Choosing your people isn't the same as choosing against love. Sometimes it's choosing a different kind of love. The kind that puts others first. The kind that sacrifices for the greater good." "Did you regret it?" "Every day for about 5 years. Then less and less as time went on." "Now?" Nakai shrugged. "I don't know. I had a good life. Helped a lot of people. Raised nieces and nephews as my own. That matters. But you still wonder. Always. That's the price of choosing." Nakai looked at her directly. "But Elena, and hear this clearly, there is no wrong choice here. Only different consequences. You go back, you save lives, but lose something precious. You stay, you keep something precious, but risk lives. Either way, you're giving something up. That's what makes it so hard." "How do I know which is right?" "You don't. You just have to decide what you can live with and what you can't." Elena sat with that for a long time after Nakai left. The camp grew quiet around her as people settled in for the night. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere else, someone was singing softly. These people had given her everything: shelter, family, purpose, love. They'd risked their lives for her, changed their routines, accepted her despite every reason not to. Could she really walk away from them to save them? Could she really stay knowing it might get them all killed? The answer came slowly, painfully, like pulling thorns from flesh. She found Kyle on watch at the camp's edge, staring out into the darkness. He didn't turn when she approached. "I've made my decision," Elena said quietly. "And?" "I'm going back." Kyle's shoulders sagged slightly, though his voice remained steady. "Good. That's the right choice. But not because you told me to, and not because I think it's what you want. I'm going back because these people deserve to live without fear, because Kai deserves to grow up safe, because the two warriors who died shouldn't have died for nothing." "Elena, let me finish." She moved to stand beside him. "I'm going back, but I'm not giving up. I'm not forgetting, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life locked away playing pretend." She took his hand. 5 years, maybe 10. Marcus said. "That's how long the protection lasts, and when it's over, when the treaties expire and the attention shifts, I'm coming back. To you. To here. To the life I actually want." Kale finally turned to look at her, his eyes bright in the moonlight. "That's a long time." "I know, but I've already spent my whole life waiting for it to start." "What's a few more years?" "Everything could change. You could change your mind, meet someone else. Decide this life isn't worth it. Or none of that could happen, or you could change your mind." Elena squeezed his hand. "But I don't think you will, and I know I won't." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can. Because for the first time in my life, I know who I am. And who I am loves you, loves this place, loves these people. That's not going to change just because I'm living somewhere else temporarily." Kale pulled her against him, his arms tight around her. "I hate this. Me too. I love you. I love you too. That's why I'm doing this." They stood there holding each other until the sky began to lighten, neither willing to let go. Finally, as the camp started to wake, Kyle stepped back. "When?" he asked. "Today, before I lose my nerve. I'll ride with you to the meeting point." "Kyle." "Don't argue. I'm not letting you do this alone." Elena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The next few hours were a blur of goodbyes. Kai cried and clung to Elena until Ayita gently pried her away. Nakai gave her a small medicine bundle for the journey ahead, both the physical one and the longer one. Dakota clasped her arm in the warrior's way and told her she'd always have family here. Then it was time to go. Kael rode beside her in silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the meeting point, Marcus was already there with his men. "You came," he said, something like satisfaction in his voice. "I came. Do you have the documents?" Marcus handed her a leather folder. Inside were official treaties, signed orders limiting military expansion, guarantees of territorial protection. It was real. Binding. 5 years minimum, Marcus said. Could be longer if I can convince the right people that this territory isn't strategic, but 5 for certain. Elena nodded and dismounted. She turned to Kael, who'd stayed on his horse, his face carefully blank. 5 years, she said quietly, for his ears only. Or 10. Or 10. But I'll be back. I know. His voice was rough. I'll be waiting. She wanted to kiss him goodbye, but Marcus and his men were watching. So instead, she just touched his hand briefly, letting the contacts say everything they couldn't. Then she turned and walked toward Marcus, toward her old life, toward the sacrifice that would keep her new family safe. As she mounted the horse Marcus provided, she looked back one more time. Kael sat tall and still on his horse, backlit by the rising sun. He raised one hand in farewell, and Elena raised hers in return. Then Marcus started riding toward the fort, and Elena followed, leaving the desert behind. The first year was the hardest. Elena played her role with mechanical precision, the rescued captive, grateful to be saved, eager to return to civilization. She attended parties at the fort, smiled through dinners with her father's business associates, pretended interest in the right causes. In private, she and Marcus maintained their arrangement, separate rooms, separate lives, cordial public appearances. He kept his end of the bargain. The territories remained protected, the expansion halted. And she kept hers. No scandal, no running, no contact with her former captors. But at night, alone in her room, Elena studied maps of the desert territories. She practiced the language Nakai had taught her so she wouldn't forget. She kept herself strong, walking miles each day, maintaining the skills Kael had drilled into her. Her father noticed the change in her and didn't like it. "You're different," he said over dinner one night. "Harder." "I survived captivity. That changes a person." "Yes, but—" He frowned. "You don't seem grateful to be home." "I'm grateful to be alive. Home is complicated." Samuel Cross studied her with those calculating eyes she'd grown up under. "Marcus says you're holding up your end of the arrangement. That's all I ask." "Is it? Because it seems like you ask for a lot more than that." "Don't be impertinent." "I'm not being impertinent. I'm being honest. Something we've never been very good at in this family." Her father's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. After that, they spoke even less than before. The second year was easier. Elena had found her rhythm, the balance between the life she was living and the life she was waiting to return to. She discovered she could use her position for good, advocating for fair trade practices, pushing back against aggressive expansion proposals, quietly undermining the worst of her father's schemes. It wasn't the life she wanted, but it wasn't worthless either. The third year brought unexpected news. Her father suffered a stroke. Not fatal, but debilitating enough that he had to step back from his business interests. Control passed to Elena as his only heir, and she used it to dismantle some of his worst practices. Marcus watched this transformation with something like respect. "You've become formidable," he told her once. "I almost regret not getting to know you before all this." "Almost?" "Almost. But then we'd have to actually pretend to like each other, and this arrangement works better." They'd developed an odd friendship, built on mutual respect and absolute honesty about their lack of romantic feeling. It wasn't love, but it wasn't hate either. It was something functional, and Elena found she could live with that. The fourth year brought word through Brennan. The camp was thriving. The protection had held. No major conflicts, no forced relocations. Kael had negotiated with other groups, expanding their network of allies. They were surviving, more than surviving. They were growing stronger. Elena kept that knowledge close, a warm secret she carried through the long social functions and tedious business meetings. They were okay. He was okay. She could endure anything knowing that. The fifth year arrived faster than she expected. The treaty terms were up for renewal, and both sides agreed to extend them. Another 5 years of protection in exchange for continued peace. Marcus told her at breakfast one morning, The renewal went through. Your friends are safe for another half-decade. They're not my friends. I was their captive. Right. Of course. His tone suggested he knew exactly what she was doing, but he didn't push. Elena did the math. 10 years total from when she'd left. She'd be 33 when the protection expired. Still young enough to start over, to return to the life she'd chosen. If Kyle still wanted her by then, if he hadn't moved on, found someone else, decided she wasn't worth waiting for. But she pushed those doubts away. She'd made her choice. She'd see it through. The years continued. 6, 7, 8. Elena became a power in the territory in her own right, not through her father or her husband, but through her own work. She negotiated better terms for smaller ranchers. She funded schools and medical clinics. She became someone who mattered, who could make real change. It wasn't the change she'd envisioned, but it was change nonetheless. 9 years in, Marcus came to her with a proposal. I'm being reassigned. Promotion, actually. They want me in Washington. Congratulations. It means leaving here, leaving this post. He paused. We could get a quiet divorce, mutual agreement, no scandal. You've more than fulfilled your end of our bargain. Elena stared at him. You'd do that? Why not? I got what I needed from this arrangement. So did you. No point dragging it out forever. Marcus smiled slightly. Besides, I met someone. Someone I might actually want to marry for real reasons. Can't do that while I'm still attached to you. Who is she? A senator's daughter. Smart, ambitious, perfect for a military career headed toward politics. He looked almost embarrassed. I think I might actually love her. Then yes, let's divorce. You deserve to be happy. So do you. Marcus hesitated, then added, There's nothing keeping you here anymore, you know? Your father's incapacitated. The business runs itself. You've built enough goodwill that no one would blame you if you stepped away. Are you suggesting I leave? I'm suggesting you've spent 9 years paying a debt that's already been paid. Maybe it's time to collect what you're owed. The divorce was finalized quietly, buried in legal notices no one paid attention to. Marcus left for Washington with his new fiancée. Elena's father passed away in his sleep 6 months later, his business empire left entirely to her. She sold most of it, keeping only enough to fund the schools and clinics she'd established. Then she packed a single bag with supplies and set out at dawn, riding northeast into the desert. She was 32 years old, free for the first time since that wedding day a decade ago, and she was going home. The landscape had changed and not changed. The desert was still vast, still beautiful, still indifferent to human concerns. But Elena knew how to read it now, how to listen to what it was saying. She found water sources from memory, built fires without thinking, tracked game with skills that came back easier than she'd expected. Everything Cale had taught her was still there, waiting to be used. It took her 3 days to find the camp. They'd moved it slightly, maybe a mile from where it had been, but the basic location was the same. She approached in daylight, making no effort to hide. Scouts would have seen her hours ago. They'd know she was coming. Sure enough, Dakota was waiting at the camp's edge. He looked older, gray in his hair now, the scar on his face more weathered, but his eyes were the same. You came back, he said in English. I told you I would. Many people say things they don't mean. I'm not many people. Dakota smiled. No, you're not. He gestured toward the camp. He's been expecting you. For about a year now, I'd say. Watching the horizon like you'd appear any day. Is he still alone? Yes. Still stubborn? Also yes. Still in love with you? Dakota's smile widened. I'd say that's something you should ask him yourself. Elena's heart was hammering as she walked into the camp. People looked up, and one by one recognition dawned. An elderly woman touched her arm, smiling. A man nodded in respect. Children stared with open curiosity. Then a familiar small figure barreled into her, nearly knocking her over. Elena! Kai, no longer a child but a young woman now, hugged her fiercely. You're back. You're actually back. I promised, didn't I? 10 years is a long time. I thought maybe you'd forget us. Never, not for a second. Nakai appeared, moving slower than before, but still sharp-eyed. Well, look what the desert brought back. Hello, Nakai. You look older. Good. You needed some years on you. The older woman embraced her quickly, then stepped back. He's at the North Ridge. Been up there all morning. Elena found him exactly where Nakai said he'd be, standing on a ridge overlooking the valley, his back to her. His hair was longer now, tied back, with threads of gray that hadn't been there before. His shoulders were still broad, his stance still that same careful stillness. "Kael," she said quietly. He turned, and for a moment they just looked at each other. 10 years collapsed into nothing. 10 years meant everything. "You came back," he said finally, his voice rough. "Did you doubt I would?" "Every day. Every single day." Elena closed the distance between them, and then she was in his arms, and he was holding her like he'd never let go, and she was crying and laughing at the same time. "I'm sorry it took so long," she said against his chest. "You came back. That's all that matters." They stood there as the sun climbed higher, holding each other, while the camp below went about its daily business. Kai was chattering to anyone who'd listen about Elena's return. Nakai was already directing people to prepare a welcome feast. Life continued, as it always did. "I sold my father's business," Elena said eventually. "Set up funds to continue the work I'd started. Then I left. No obligations, no ties. Just free." "And Marcus?" "Divorced. He met someone he actually loved. Let me go without a fight." Kael pulled back to look at her, searching her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm here, really here. Not visiting, not temporarily. I'm here to stay if you'll have me." "If I'll have you?" Kael laughed, the sound breaking slightly. "Elena, I've been waiting 10 years, if I'll have you. As if there was ever a question." "There was. You could have moved on, found someone else." "I tried. Believe me, I tried. The council kept introducing me to suitable women, strong, capable, perfect for a leader." He touched her face gently. "But none of them were you. None of them looked at me and saw past all the walls I put up. None of them made me want to be better than I thought I could be." "So is that a yes?" "That's a yes. Today, tomorrow, forever, yes." They were married 2 weeks later in a ceremony that blended traditions from both their worlds. Elena wore simple leather and beadwork, her hair braided the way Kai had taught her years ago. Kael wore traditional clothing but held Elena's hand in the way she'd grown up seeing. The ceremony was conducted in both languages, witnessed by the whole community. When it was over and they were officially joined, Kael pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "No running this time." "No running," Elena agreed. "This is where I belong, with you, with these people, in this land that taught me who I really am." The feast afterward lasted into the night, people celebrating not just the marriage but Elena's return, the decade of peace that it held, the future that seemed possible now. Elena sat beside Kael, watching Kai dance with the other young people, watching Nakai direct the festivities with the same bossy efficiency she'd always had, watching Dakota tell stories that made people laugh until they cried. This was family. Not the one she'd been born into, but the one she'd chosen, the one she'd fought for and sacrificed for and waited for. And it was worth it. Every hard day, every moment of doubt, every year of waiting, worth it for this. Kael took her hand under the table, squeezing gently. "Happy?" "Completely. Even though you gave up a comfortable life, wealth and status and safety?" "I didn't give up anything that mattered. I traded comfort for belonging, status for authenticity, safety for freedom." Elena looked at him. "That's not a sacrifice. That's a choice. The best choice I ever made." "Even when it gets hard, because it will. Life here isn't easy. Especially when it gets hard. That's when it matters most." She leaned against him. "I don't want easy. I never wanted easy. I just wanted real." They sat there as the stars came out, as the fire burned down to embers, as people gradually drifted off to their tents. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. The cavalry wouldn't stay away forever. New conflicts would arise. Nothing was ever truly settled. But tonight, under the vast desert sky, with Kael beside her and family all around her, Elena felt something she'd never experienced in all her years of comfort and privilege. She felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because all the problems were solved, but because she was finally, completely, authentically herself. herself. Because she'd chosen her own path instead of having it chosen for her. Because she'd learned that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing were the same thing. And because she'd discovered that belonging wasn't about where you were born, or who your family was, or what name you carried, it was about who you chose to stand beside, what you were willing to fight for, where you felt most alive. For Elena, that had always been here. In the desert that had nearly killed her, but instead remade her. Among people who'd had every reason to reject her, but instead made room for her. Beside a man who'd shown her that strength and gentleness weren't opposites. That leadership and love could coexist. That choosing the hard path didn't mean walking it alone. She'd started this journey running from something. She was ending it running toward everything she'd ever wanted and never known to ask for. That was more than enough. That was everything.